Chapter 98. Since they were on Guardian Island, Louis naturally couldn't fly. Qi Yuntian left Soaring Crane Tower with him and walked down the mountain path. This was the highest point of the Guardian Palace. As far as the eye could see, the entire Guardian Palace could be seen. However, the main hall was covered in hazy mist and brilliant light, giving off an indescribable feeling. Obviously, this was where Peng Jinren lived, and no one was allowed to peep in. After a few glances, Zhang Yan felt a faint sense of dizziness. Knowing that his cultivation level was not high enough, he quickly looked away. At this moment, they saw a cultivator with a tall hat and a wide belt walking towards them. That person also saw the two of them. He cupped his hands and said, "I was wondering who it was. So it's Senior Marshal Brother Qi. Greetings." Seeing this person, Qi Yuntian frowned slightly and returned the greeting. Then, he turned his head and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Zhang, let's go first. I'll look for you another day." Zhang Yan knew that this person might have some background, so he didn't say much. After cupping his hands, he walked down alone. When he passed by the cultivator looked at him with a hint of playfulness in his eyes and said, "Are you the disciple that Senior Marshal Brother Qi saved from the Devil's Chamber? I see that the mysterious light around his body is faint and weak. Is he worthy of Senior Marshal Brother Qi's help? I wonder where all the good people in the sect have gone." Zhang Yan didn't pay attention to him. He just secretly remembered this person's face and planned to deal with him in the future. He walked quickly and soon left the Guardian Palace. Looking around, he saw that there were more and more cultivators gathered on the island. There were also many ships and carriages flying over from the sky. He couldn't help but sigh. When he came, the island was deserted and there were only a few dozen disciples. Now that Peng Jinren had become the enlightened master of the Dongtian, people immediately came to the island, afraid that they wouldn't be able to curry favor with him. But after a few more glances, he felt that the ships and carriages were coming and going, and the figures of people were like a dream. Passing through the clouds, it was like the virtual light he saw on the flying crane tower. It felt unreal. He suddenly realized something and couldn't help but smile. Life is like a dream. I've always been pursuing Tao. What do others have to do with me? Even after 100 years, when I look back on the present, it will only be a smile. Then, he leaped up and left the Guardian Island in a streak of blue light, heading towards the east. Borrowing the power of the sword escape, his speed was much faster than when he came. In less than a day, he had returned to Spirit Page Island. Luo Xiao, who was guarding the island, apparently noticed his return. As soon as the restriction was dispersed, Zhang Yan calmly pressed down the cloud and landed on the mountain path. He looked up and saw two female cultivators standing there. One of them was Luo Xiao and the other was a beauty dressed in palace attire. Luo Xiao came up and bowed. "Lord has reached the mystic light realm. I must congratulate Lord." Zhang Yan nodded slightly and said with a smile, "You're too polite, Brother Luo." The beauty in the palace dress gracefully came up to him, her eyes filled with joy. She bowed and smiled sweetly, "Greetings, Master." Zhang Yan looked at her and smiled faintly. "Congratulations, Brother Shang, for successfully transforming." The beauty in palace dress bowed once more, but there were tears in her eyes this time. "It's all thanks to Lord, the restrictions on this island can block the heavenly tribulation, and Sister Luo's help that I was able to successfully pass the heavenly tribulation." It turned out that this woman was the fish demon beauty Shang Shang whom Zhang Yan had bestowed the form transformation pill upon her. Now, she had shed her demon shell and transformed into a human. From now on, her cultivation was no longer comparable to when she was in her demon form. Luo Xiao covered her mouth and laughed. "Don't drag me into this. In the future, when my sister and I transform, this matter will fall on Lord. I won't worry about this." Shang Shang's face went red after hearing this, and she lowered her head without saying anything. Zhang Yan smiled faintly and walked into the cave. After entering the cave, he sat down on the stone platform and asked, "Brother Luo, I've been gone for 2 months. Has the palace been well?" Luo Shao bowed and said, "Reporting to Lord, little sister Shang is taking care of everything in the palace. She's an expert, and everything is in order. The strong men don't lack food and clothing, and they even built 2 beautiful pavilions on the island. Lord can visit them when you're free, but 10 days ago, someone sent a letter with a sleeve. Aside from that, there's nothing else." She waved her hand and took out a letter from her sleeve. She took 2 steps forward and presented it to Zhang Yan with both hands. Zhang Yan reached out and took it. He didn't hide it from the two, he opened it and read it. After a while, he couldn't help but sigh. "Senior brother Xie, there's no need to do this." It turned out that Xie Zongyuan couldn't pass on the news that he was trapped in the demon's cave in time. Although it wasn't his fault, he couldn't help feeling guilty. He felt that he didn't have the face to face Zhang Yan, so he sent a letter to apologize and gave him an item to make up for the guilt in his heart. Luo Shao rolled up her sleeve and revealed a fair arm. She pointed to the table and said, "Lord, that sleeve is on the table." "We didn't peek." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "There's no harm in looking. It's just something that senior brother Xie gave me. Speaking of this, I went to the demon's cave to cultivate and obtained a few magic treasures. I can't use so many, so it's just right for you." When Luo Shao heard this, she couldn't help but cover her mouth and exclaim, "Lord, did you meet some powerful cultivator on this trip?" Zhang Yan shook his head and said, "It's a long story. Take a look at these magic treasures if you like them." With a flick of his sleeve, 3 more magic treasures appeared on the table in front of him. They were the purple star moon net, the wind and thunder trident, and the cloud-filling bowl. When Luo Shao saw the purple star moon net, her beautiful eyes couldn't help but brighten up. She went forward to take it and said happily, "It's a high-grade spirit tool. This ribbon is mine, what do you think, Lord?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "What a coincidence. I originally wanted to give this to fellow Taoist Luo." Shang Chang's status was far from Luo Zhao's. Although the magic treasures were in front of her, she didn't dare to make a decision. She just lowered her head and stood there without moving. Zhang Yan looked at her and said, "Fellow Taoist Shang, when fellow Taoist Luo and I go out in the future, we'll need someone to take care of our cave. Why don't you pick one as well? It'll be good for protection." Shang Chang said in a low voice, "Yes." She wasn't picky. She took the wind and thunder trident in front of her and left. Zhang Yan nodded secretly. This Shang Chang knew when to advance and when to retreat. At this moment, Luo Shao was a little reluctant. She bit her lower lip and said, "Just now, Lord, you wanted to go out with me, but, to kill the 3 pools?" Zhang Yan waved his hand and said, "Fellow Taoist Luo, you know how difficult it is. There's no need for you to go, but you need to write down the familiar paths of the 3 pools so that it'll be easier for me to act." Luo Shao couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. It was hard for her to personally kill her own kind. She thought for a while and said, "Actually, although I'm familiar with the paths of the Jade Blood Pool, I don't know all the secrets of the underwater cave. However, I do know a fellow Taoist who can definitely help Lord." Zhang Yan was surprised and said, "Oh? Who is it?" These few days, Luo Shao had been guarding the cave. As a Yao cultivator, it was impossible for her to make friends with a disciple of the Qinsang school. Shang Chang was bought from the Water Nation and hadn't gone far from home, so how could she know the actual situation of the 3 pools? Luo Shao smiled and said, "Could it be that Lord has forgotten about that fellow Taoist who's still waiting in the river to recognize you as a servant? His original cave is under the 3 pools, so he knows all the hidden cave dwellings like the back of his hand." Zhang Yan couldn't help but come to a realization. So it was the golden flood dragon in the river. These few days, he was focused on increasing his cultivation and had long forgotten about this matter. He asked again, "How did fellow Taoist Luo know that he's familiar with the paths of the 3 pools?" Luo Shao said, "In these 2 months, I remembered Lord's instructions not to open the restrictions lightly. Since I was bored, I would go and talk to that fellow Taoist Ao from time to time. After a while, I managed to get a lot of information out of him." Zhang Yan stood up and said, "All right, there's no time to lose. I'll go and take him now." After he finished speaking, he came out of the cave with a flash of light and instantly arrived at the side of the island's river. He called out, "Fellow Taoist, please come out." How did he become a profound light realm cultivator after not seeing him for more than 2 months? The waves surged, and the golden flood dragon's huge head popped out of the water. It widened its demonic eyes and looked at Zhang Yan from head to toe, but its body was bobbing up and down in the water. Zhang Yan floated in the air, and his feet were supported by a water blue light. He looked down from above and asked, "Do you know why I'm here today?" The golden flood dragon's eyes looked around, but it didn't say anything. Zhang Yan's gaze turned cold, and he said, "You already agreed to recognize me as your master last time. Are you going back on your word today?" Luo Shao caught up at this moment and stood beside Zhang Yan. Seeing this situation, she smiled charmingly and said, "Don't be anxious, Lord. Please stay to the side for now. I'll persuade fellow Taoist Ao." Zhang Yan knew that she had a plan in her heart, so he waved his sleeves and said, "Fine, I won't force you for now because of fellow Taoist Luo." After that, he turned around and walked to another place. After Zhang Yan left, Luo Shao walked in front of the golden flood dragon and said, "Fellow Taoist Ao, after so many days of talking to me, have you forgotten all about it? Do you think that Lord wants to be a servant?" Right now, he only saw that it was an ancient species, and he wanted to see something new. He also saw that fellow Taoist Zhang's cultivation improved by leaps and bounds. In the future, when his cultivation is higher, his horizons will also be wider. Do you think that he will still care about it? If I submitted to Lord long ago, I might even be able to get some benefits. She took out the purple star river moon net and waved it. "Look, this is what Lord just gave me." The fiend race had always been poor. Only when their tribes gathered together would they have some wealth, and not everyone could get a share. Normally, they had nothing apart from their physical bodies. Now that Luo Shao casually took out a superior grade spirit artifact, the golden flood dragon was stunned. "Do you think that I can still escape from my predicament? Rather than struggling to survive, why not just recognize me as a master early? You also saw that Lord never mistreated me at all. Lord has only been in the sect for a year, and he is already a profound light realm cultivator. In the future, he will definitely be able to become an immortal. If he fails to take human form, others will just peel off his skin and bones, pull out his tendons and scales. It is not very useful. Only my Lord still wants to keep it. If it were me, I would have swallowed it long ago to cleanse my bloodline and raise my cultivation. Isn't that better?" Luo Shao told him about the pros and cons, and the golden flood dragon already had this thought over the past 2 months. Now, it was even more moved. Its huge flood dragon head nodded like a chicken pecking at rice. It said, "Thank you for reminding me. Ao Tong is willing to recognize you as a master." Seeing that the golden flood dragon was willing to use its real name, Luo Shao knew that it was sincerely recognizing her as its master. She immediately turned around and went to invite Zhang Yan back. The golden flood dragon immediately forced out a bit of essence blood, and made an oath in front of Zhang Yan. When the essence blood dissolved, Zhang Yan sensed it, and he immediately took out a talisman to remove the restriction. He smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Ao, if you find it boring, you can take a trip to the Dragon Abyss Lake." He walked out of the cave and stepped on the ground. A cloud rose from the ground and lifted him up slowly. He landed at the fire vent on the mountain peak. He walked forward and looked down. He saw that he was surrounded by black clouds that covered the sun and the sky. Smoke and dust blocked the orifices. If a normal person stood here, they would suffocate to death in a few breaths. Zhang Yan didn't feel any discomfort. Instead, the metal and fire xian seeds were jumping around and became more active than usual. He stood up and leaped. A gold and a red light wrapped around him and rushed down. His speed was extremely fast. Along the way, he avoided the smoke and the fire. Not long after, he arrived at the belly of the fire pit. He felt that he couldn't go any deeper. He saw that the walls were burning like a furnace, red like blood. Even with the protection of the mystic light, the heat still made him feel like he was being burned. He estimated that he had already gone more than 3,000 feet underground. Not only was the evil aura here dense, the spiritual aura was also abundant. He opened his mouth and took a deep breath of the evil aura. Then, he sprayed the mystic light. With a chi-chi sound, it was as if he had thrown a handful of boiling oil into the fire. The light soared up and became even more dazzling. Seeing this, he was delighted. The Spirit Page Island was indeed a blessed land. Even if it wasn't as good as the Demon Pit, when his cultivation deepened in the future, the spiritual aura wouldn't be much different if he went further underground. At this moment, he felt a sense of fear in his heart. It wasn't his own feeling, but the change of mood of Ao Tong, which was connected to his blood essence. Zhang Yan frowned. Could it be that he had met an old-fashioned fellow disciple? He used the sword ray to fly up and in an instant, he was out of the fire vent. Looking up, he saw Ao Tong lying obediently in the water. At this moment, he didn't dare to move. The power he had just now was nowhere to be seen. Above it, there were two cultivators pointing at it. One of them was Qi Yuntian. Zhang Yan's expression changed. Qi Yuntian actually came so quickly and personally. He didn't just send one disciple as he had expected. Zhang Yan couldn't help but nod his head. Regardless of whether the other party was putting on an act or not, as the disciple of Meng Zhen and the number one disciple under the third generation, it wasn't easy for him to do this. He leaned forward and heard Qi Yuntian say, "Junior brother Fan, you have always had a good eye. Look, is this golden flood dragon an ancient species?" Although Qi Yuntian and Zhuang Bufan were the top 10 disciples in the sect, he didn't care about such things. He didn't care about the demonic creatures raised by his disciples. Instead, he commented with interest. The other cultivator had a round face and a big belly. He looked more like a merchant than a Taoist cultivator. He smiled and replied, 10,000 years ago, I heard that this species was everywhere in our sect. Now, it's hard to find one. This creature can fly through the clouds and enter the water. It can be used to travel to the northern underworld sea or the southern cliff fire cave. If you use it as a mount, you will be able to roam the world freely. Junior brother Zhang is really lucky to have one. At this moment, Zhang Yan came to the side of the two and said from afar, "It's just a golden flood dragon. If this senior brother likes it, then take it." The cultivator turned his head and pointed at him with a smile. He said, "Junior brother Zhang, don't make fun of me. This golden flood dragon has already confessed to me and recognized me as its master. How can you give it to me? I heard that junior brother Zhang is a disciple of the headmaster Zhou. Why don't you give me some pills?" Zhang Yan knew that he was laughing. This person's whole body was surging with true essence, giving people a great pressure, and there was even a faint murderous aura leaking out. With one look, it was obvious that he was a core formation cultivator, so why would he need his medicinal pills? He stepped forward and cupped his hands. He asked, "May I know your name, senior brother?" The cultivator smiled and returned the greeting. He said, "I am Master Meng's disciple, Fan Changqing. I came from the same sect as senior brother Qi." Zhang Yan cupped his hands again and said, "So it's senior brother Fan. Since the two of you are here, why don't you come to my abode and let me be your host?" Qi Yuntian nodded and smiled, "That's exactly what I was thinking." Zhang Yan welcomed the two of them in and arranged them to be seated. He ordered Shang Chang to prepare some fruits and wine to serve the two of them. Fan Changqing looked around, shook his head, and said, "Brother Hua, you're too poor. We cultivators don't care about these kinds of things, but some decorations can show off the elegance of our big sect's disciples. I have a lot of arrangements that are useless to me. I'll order someone to send them over another day." Since others were willing to give him tools, Zhang Yan would never refuse. He cupped his hands and said in a natural tone, "Then I will accept it." Fan Changqing saw that Zhang Yan was not embarrassed at all and thought, this junior brother Zhang is a straightforward person. That's good. I'm just afraid that he is a fake Taoist. This makes things difficult for me. It seems that senior brother Qi has a good eye for people. The three chatted for a while more before they got to the main topic. Qi Yuntian smiled faintly. He said, "I came to tell junior brother that after coming back from the demon cave, you have achieved Xian light. The sect will naturally send you to the 3 pools to kill demons. However, junior brother has only been in the sect for less than a year. It is not good to lack the help of a fellow disciple. Therefore, I specially asked junior brother Fan to come so that you can take care of each other." Zhang Yan understood that Fan Changqing's cultivation was far above his, so looking out for each other, was also Fan Changqing looking out for him. It was just that Fan Changqing was afraid that Zhang Yan's arrogant personality would not appreciate it, so he had to be tactful. Zhang Yan naturally would not be hot-headed enough to refuse such kindness. He smiled and raised his cup to Fan Changqing. "I hope senior brother will give me some pointers in the future." Di Changqing quickly raised his cup and said, "You flatter me." Chapter 100. Qi Yuntian and Fan Changqing stayed at Zhang Yan's place for a day before they left. Before leaving, Fan Changqing reminded Zhang Yan, "Junior martial brother, don't be merciful in this battle. If you have any tricks up your sleeves, use them all. No matter how many merits you get, it's never too much. I know you just came back from Mo Shui, so I'll give you some time to arrange your chores. 10 days later, come find me at Qingqing Peak, and I'll take you to the 3 lakes." After more than 2 months of preparation, Qinsang School was ready to attack the 3 lakes' demonic beasts. However, this couldn't be done in one go. It needed to be done step by step. First, they needed to send some disciples with decent cultivation to clean up the scattered tribes outside of the 3 lakes. Then, they would attack the mountains that were scattered all over the place. And Fan Changqing was one of the disciples that went first. Zhang Yan quickly responded and stood at the entrance of the cave, sending Qi Yuntian and Fan Changqing off. After returning to the cave, he thought to himself, "If I go alone, I have the Tai golden fire and all kinds of treasures with me. I'll be prepared. However, if I go with senior martial brother Fan and the others, I'll need to make more preparations. I can't let them look down on me." After entering the mystic light realm, he originally wanted to cultivate the 5-direction 5-elemental great mystic true light. Although this technique was extremely profound, and he couldn't see the end of it, he had the incomplete jade in his hands, so he wasn't afraid of techniques that changed his true qi the least. However, there was a problem. Cultivating this technique required the essence of the 5 directions 5-element Taishian true light. How could he find the time to find it? Therefore, this technique wasn't something he could use right now. But it wasn't that he didn't have other methods. Besides the serene in heavy water, he'd once obtained a talisman pouch book from Shen Yifeng, and it recorded all sorts of wonderful methods to utilize talismans. He remembered that when he fought with Shen Yifeng, those talismans were actually able to resist magic treasures and were even able to break through the clouds and mist. Guang Yuan's sect was originally a big sect. Even though it was declining now, this technique must have its own unique points. Zhang Yan thought to himself, "Why don't I use these few days of free time to practice in the broken jade? At that time, I'll have another way to deal with my enemies." He reached into his sleeves and was about to take out the book when he touched something else. He thought, "Now that I'm a mystic light realm cultivator, this thing can be used." He took out the object and saw that it was glowing with a yellow light. Its shape was not much different from a normal talisman flute. It was the origin talisman that could absorb qi into one's body. This talisman had been in his sleeve for a long time, and it had not been used. More than half of Shen Yifeng's Jin Yuan had already dissipated. Zhang Yan used a mysterious light to brush the talisman, brushing away the remaining trace of Jin Yuan. Then, he sat down and transferred his own Jin Yuan into the talisman. He originally thought that he would be able to deal with it in half a day, but when his Jin Yuan entered it, he felt as if he was in a bottomless ravine that couldn't be filled no matter how hard he tried. It wasn't until 2 days later when a deacon boy came to visit that he stopped. Zhang Yan took out a few pills and swallowed them. After adjusting his condition, he called the deacon Taoist boy in and asked him what was going on. The deacon boy was very respectful and said that he had come under orders to bring over the robes and jade pendants for Mystic Light Realm core disciples, as well as 1,000 spirit shells. Apart from that, there was also a verdant bamboo. This bamboo had a lot of qi and was obviously grown with secret herbs. If it was planted, it would become a verdant bamboo forest in less than a month. Zhang Yan picked up the green bamboo and looked at it. He couldn't help but ask curiously, "What's the meaning of this?" The deacon Taoist boy replied obediently, "Uncle, the new year has come, and the cycle begins again. Therefore, the sect bestowed this item to signify that senior martial brother's cultivation is climbing higher and higher, and he's going one step further." Zhang Yan smiled. It was rare for the sect to have a human touch. It was very different from when he first arrived. He suddenly thought of something and asked, "You're a disciple of the Spirit Machine Institute?" The deacon boy replied, "Yes." Zhang Yan couldn't help but understand. Many of the sect's gifts were given to the disciples through the Spirit Machine Institute, and this institute was in the hands of Meng Zhen. However, Meng Zhen didn't usually manage things, so it was easy to tell who was in charge. No wonder he was given so many benefits. The boy continued, "Martial uncle is now a Mystic Light Realm cultivator. If you have any relatives, you can bring them to live on the island. If martial uncle likes peace, you can also settle them in one of the 9 cities in the Mystic Turtle continent. Although it is in the sect, it is no different from a city in the mortal world. Light Chi Realm cultivators could bring a few family members to settle in the sect. If they were Mystic Light Realm cultivators, they had the right to bring their entire family. However, there was one disadvantage. If this cultivator was a stranger, there would be no one to take care of his family and they would be bullied. However, there were no taxes or labor in the mortal world, and it wasn't controlled by the mortal world's government. If they were careful, they could live for hundreds of years. Maybe there would be descendants who also obtained immortal fate here, so most people were willing to live here. Zhang Yan shook his head. He didn't have any relatives for a long time. He only faintly remembered that he once had a pair of younger brothers and sisters. Later on, when his grandfather went to Cloud Continent to take up his position, he met a group of black-clothed bandits. Since then, no one knew where he went. Now, he was the only one left. Maybe this was because of the Zhou clan. If that was really the case, he might have to understand the cause and effect of this in the future. He could find some time to bring Zhang Shi over. However, this old man was stubborn and had a lot of conflicts with the immortal Tao. Everyone had their own fate. If it couldn't work out, he wouldn't force it. However, when this matter was brought up, he remembered that Lu Tao had asked him to deliver the 7-heart dragon pendant. After sending the deacon boy away, he took out the jade pendant. He didn't look at it that day, but now that he flipped it over, he saw the words, Lu Yenni, engraved on the back of the jade pendant. That must be the name of Lu Tao's descendant. He thought to himself that he had already been out of Devil Shui for 3 days. 8 days later, he would have to go to the 3 lakes. He might as well send this jade pendant over and settle this matter as soon as possible. As he thought of this, he took a few steps out of the immortal cave. With a leap, he shot towards Immortaling Island. Immortaling Island was located in the southeast of the Dragon Abyss Lake. This island was extremely huge and formed its own continent. The island lord was over 100 years old and was rumored to be Meng Zhen's grand disciple. He brought over 1,000 disciples to cultivate here. Moreover, the island produced beautiful jades and stones. Thus, it was easy to find. In less than 2 hours, he could see an island that stretched for thousands of miles on top of the cloud. There was a glaze-like brilliance coming from the island. He knew he had arrived at the island. When he got closer, he saw that there were a few temples along the way along the mountain ridge. He came to the sky above the main hall at the highest point. He pressed down on the cloud and landed. He stood in front of the temple and immediately, a deacon Taoist came out from the temple to welcome him. When that person saw the light, he knew that it was a Xian light realm cultivator. He also saw that Mo Wuji was wearing a legacy disciple robe. He didn't dare to delay as he hurriedly bowed and asked, "May I ask why senior brother is here?" Zhang Yan glanced at him and clasped his hands calmly. "I'm Spirit Page Island's Zhang Yan. Did senior brother Lu Tao cultivate here before?" "Oh, so it's senior brother Zhang." The Taoist sighed. "Unfortunately, senior brother Lu went to Devil Shui 2 months ago. A few days ago, I heard that he was already a stranger. I'm afraid that senior brother's trip will be in vain." Zhang Yan said solemnly, "I'm here because he asked me to find a junior of his. I wonder if he's here." The Taoist was startled and had a weird expression on his face. He hesitated for a moment before saying, "This is senior brother Lu's junior. I heard that senior brother Lu is a stranger, so he has already returned to his hometown." Zhang Yan frowned. "How far did he go?" "Less than 3 days." Zhang Yan stared at the Taoist priest for a while, and the latter's expression became a little unnatural. In the end, he let out a cold laugh, and a ray of light soared into the sky, heading in the direction of the exit of the great pool of Dragon Lake. Seeing that Zhang Yan had left, the Taoist finally let out a sigh of relief. He wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and thought to himself, "I didn't think that junior brother Lu would be so capable, being able to form a relationship with a mystic light realm core disciple. Junior brothers have made a mistake this time." Zhang Yan chased north. He knew that Lu Tao's junior wouldn't be able to leave the Great Dragon Lake within 3 days. However, he couldn't find the person he was looking for even after chasing a few ships. About half an hour later, a 2-story sailboat appeared in the distance. His eyes were sharp, and with a glance, he could clearly see the expressions of the people on the boat. At this time, he couldn't help but let out a cry of surprise. He saw a little girl kneeling on the 2-story ship, scrubbing the deck. She was only a little over 10 years old, and her face was still childish. Her features were pretty, and she bore some resemblance to Lu Tao. With a flash of light, Zhang Yan steadily landed on the ship. Afraid that he would startle the girl, he slowly walked in front of her and asked in a gentle voice, "Are you Lu Yenny?" The little girl saw a flash of light, and a handsome cultivator appeared in front of her. She had seen many people like this on the island, so she wasn't surprised. She stood up and politely bowed like an adult and said, "Reporting to Celestial Master, it is indeed my daughter." Zhang Yan took out the 7-heart dragon pendant and shook it, and said, "Do you recognize this item?" When Lu Yenny saw the jade pendant, her eyes reddened, and she knelt on the ground. She sobbed and said, "This is Uncle's 7-heart dragon jade. Before Uncle left, he told me that if someone brought this jade pendant to me, I should listen to him in everything." Zhang Yan nodded. So this girl was Lu Tao's niece. He pointed to the ground and said in a deep voice, "Let me ask you, who arranged for you to do this rough work here? I'm here for everything, so you don't have to worry. Just say it." Although the boatman had seen cultivators who could fly freely in the sky, when would they even look at a mortal like him? Not to mention that he was on the ship, so he couldn't help but feel a little dazed. At this moment, when he saw Zhang Yan's lightning-like gaze sweep over him, he knelt on the ground and kowtowed repeatedly. He said with fear and trepidation, "I didn't know it was Celestial Master's family. I deserve to die, I deserve to die." Lu Yenny took a step forward and raised her head, saying, "This has nothing to do with Uncle Boatman. Uncle Boatman was willing to bring me thousands of miles back to my hometown, and he didn't charge me for the boat. So I volunteered to do this work. When Zhang Yan heard this, he nodded slightly. With a wave of his sleeve, he threw out a few spirit shells. With a flash of mysterious light, he brought Lu Yenny up to 100 meters in the air. Suddenly in the sky, Lu Yenny didn't panic. Instead, her bright eyes looked around curiously. She saw that there were fog and clouds around her, and that there were sparkles under her feet. It was as if she was stepping on a blue galaxy. Her expression revealed a little curiosity and envy. At this moment, Zhang Yan carefully sized her up and couldn't help but be slightly shocked. This girl's eyes were as bright as the stars, her skin was as smooth as jade, and there was a cloud overflowing from her canopy. Her talent was so good that he had never seen anyone like her in his life. Even Qi Nan couldn't compare. No wonder those Taoists on Immortaling Island didn't dare to accept disciples. This girl might be the reincarnation of a powerful cultivator, so they were afraid of accepting karma. However, logically speaking, these cultivators would have disciples in their previous lives. At the very least, they would have good friends and relatives. They should have come to enlighten them a long time ago, so why haven't they come yet? Female cultivators were different from male cultivators. If they waited another 1 or 2 years, they would have missed the age to cultivate. Zhang Yan waved his hand and allowed the girl to come closer. Then, he asked in a pleasant tone, Lu Yenny, let me ask you. You are living well on Immortaling Island, so why do you want to leave? Even on the mystic light, Lu Yenny didn't forget her etiquette. She first bowed before replying, reporting to Immortal Master, although my Lu clan has declined, Uncle still has some savings over these years, and there are still some things used by the Immortal clan. After hearing that Uncle has left, I see some uncles looking at me with unkind gazes. I'm young and weak, so I can't protect these things. I'm afraid that one day, I won't even have them, so I might as well give them up and leave. Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, You're still young, but you know the saying that an innocent man gets into trouble because of his wealth. That's rare. Thinking about how she, a girl who was just over 10 years old, had actually traveled thousands of miles to return to her hometown alone, and that none of Lu Tao's fellow disciples who were on good terms with him had come to send her off. They didn't even send a single disciple, and were so cold. It could be seen that what she had said was most likely true. Zhang Yan sighed inwardly and asked, Since that's the case, you can also bring some gold, silver, and other valuables. It should be enough for you to use when you return to your hometown. Why do you need to work on this boat? Lu Yenny replied, I'm still young, and the journey back home is long. I'm afraid that bad people will have bad intentions, so I begged Uncle at the front of the boat to let me do some odd jobs. Those who don't know the truth will think that I'm Uncle's relative, and won't bully me. What a smart and beautiful young lady! Zhang Yan exclaimed in admiration. At this moment, he couldn't help but feel a sense of appreciation for talent. Lu Yenny was so talented and beautiful, if he took her in as his disciple, she would definitely be of great help in the future. After the incident with Lu Tao, he could see clearly that on the path of cultivation, if one didn't have a trustworthy fellow disciple, once one was seriously injured, not only would one die, but once one lost contact with one's family, no one would take care of them. Those disciples of aristocratic families had relatives to take care of them, but for masters and disciples, the only people they could trust were their disciples and teachers. Zhang Yan thought to himself, It's just that I have to cultivate myself, so I don't have time to take care of her. The evil aura on Spirit Page Island is heavy, so it's not suitable for her to cultivate. Why don't I take her as a registered disciple and bring her to Senior Marshal Brother Zhou to cultivate the clear Qi scripture first? After a few years, when she has a solid foundation, it won't be too late to find a few secret manuals for her. Thinking of this, he asked warmly, Lu Yenny, how about I take you as a registered disciple? Hearing this, Lu Yenny's bright eyes revealed a hint of surprise, but then she became gloomy and lowered her head. Immortal Master, when they saw me, they all said that I have karma entanglement on me, but they don't dare to accept me. Hearing this, Zhang Yan laughed heartily, causing the clouds around him to scatter. Others don't dare to accept me, but I, Zhang Yan, do. Chapter 101. Hearing Zhang Yan's words, Lu Yenny immediately kowtowed and became his disciple. Chinese network Zhang Yan sat on the cloud and accepted her 3 kowtows. He then helped her up and said a few words of comfort. Then, he waved his sleeves and went directly to the Danding courtyard. Zhou Chengju hadn't seen Zhang Yan for 2 months, and he was worried when he heard that Zhang Yan had fallen into a demonic path. However, when he heard that Zhang Yan had returned safely a few days ago, he relaxed. Now that he saw Zhang Yan had become a mystic light realm cultivator, a hint of joy appeared on his face. Just as he was about to speak, his gaze turned and he saw a beautiful little girl next to Zhang Yan. Her small hand was holding his sleeve, and he couldn't help but be puzzled. He pointed and said, "Where did this little girl come from?" Aside from the people close to him and the children who followed him, Zhou Chengju usually didn't let anyone else on this boat. Now that Zhang Yan had brought this little girl here, he must have his reasons. Zhang Yan gently patted Lu Yenny's head and said, "Come, go kowtow to martial uncle." Lu Yenny was very obedient. She knelt down and kowtowed. She said in a crisp voice, "Disciple Lu Yenny greets martial uncle." Zhou Chengju was surprised at first, but then he smiled and nodded. He reached out his hand and said, "So it's junior brother Zhang's new disciple. No need to be so courteous. Get up." He saw that Zhang Yan didn't avoid calling him senior brother in front of this little girl, so he knew that this girl was very important to Zhang Yan and was going to be raised as a direct disciple. In a few days, junior brother will be going to the 3 lakes and won't have time to teach her. I want to leave Yenny with senior brother so she can receive pointers from senior brother. Then, Zhang Yan told Zhou Chengju about Lu Yenny's background. Zhou Chengju couldn't help but sigh and immediately agreed. Zhou Chengju was from the Dingyang Zhou clan and had cultivated for almost 400 years. He was also a Yuanying cultivator. Although his foundation was destroyed and he had no hope of advancing, he had a deep foundation and was a Pil Grandmaster of the same name in the Donghua continent. It was easy for him to take care of a disciple on behalf of Zhang Yan. He immediately called a child to help Lu Yenny settle down. After Lu Yenny left, Zhou Chengju sighed and said, "Junior brother has found a good disciple. This girl is very talented. I have cultivated for hundreds of years and have not seen many who can compare to her. Although she seems to be entangled with karma, it is not a problem for junior brother. In the future, if you attack the Zhou clan, she will be a great help." Zhang Yan was silent for a while and sighed, "I only realized recently that a single person can't accomplish anything. Senior brother Lin should also know that Qiyun Tian personally came to the Mo Shui to save me. I'm sure senior brother can guess the deeper meaning behind this." Zhou Chengju nodded and said, "I already know about this, why don't you go with the flow?" He paused and said in a low voice, "Recently, the sect leader personally came to visit me. This is the first time." Zhang Yan's expression couldn't help but change. Zhou Chengju laughed and stroked his beard. "After conquering the lower 3 pools, I'm afraid the sect will still recruit a large number of disciples. After that, there will be a competition within the sect to deal with the 1,000-year demon calamity. The number of medicinal pills needed is not small. Currently, more than 70% of the medicinal pills in the sect come from my Danding courtyard. In the next 100 years, the sect leader will need to rely on me for many things. I will take care of everything, so you just need to focus on your cultivation." Zhang Yan finally understood. No wonder Qiyun Tian personally came to the Mo Shui. In addition to the things that he valued, Zhou Chengju also played a very important role. He quickly raised his hands and said, "I still have to thank senior brother for taking care of me." Zhou Chengju waved his hand and smiled, "What are you thanking me for?" In fact, if it wasn't for your identity as a true disciple and the fact that you are valued by Marshal Nephew's son, even if I gave up my old face, as the head of the third generation, Qi Yuntian, I'm afraid he wouldn't even look at you. Zhang Yan nodded his head and chatted with him for a while. Seeing that there was nothing else, he bade farewell to Zhou Chengju and rode carefree light out of Dan Ding Pavilion. In less than a moment, he returned to his own immortal cave. The first thing he did when he returned was to order Shang Chang to serve him a brush and ink. With a few strokes, he finished a letter. After blowing the ink dry, he summoned a strong man and ordered him to deliver this letter to Immortaling Island. In this letter, he mentioned that he had accepted Lu Tao's niece as an honorary disciple. He hoped that the cultivators on the island would return Lu Tao's belongings. In the letter, he even mentioned his relationship with Qi Yuntian and Fan Changqing. Immortaling Island's island lord was only Meng Zhen's grand disciple. If he understood the stakes, he would naturally handle this matter appropriately. If he didn't do anything, then they would be seeking their own deaths. They couldn't blame anyone else. After the strong man left, Zhang Yan sat quietly for a while. Then, he dismissed everyone and sealed the door of his immortal cave. He took out the talisman book that he got from Shen Yefeng and started flipping through it. At the front of this book, it recorded the general outline of talisman books. At the back, it recorded the specific methods of forging talismans. After reading for a while, he stood up and nodded his head. Guangyuan's sect was indeed a great sect 1,000 years ago. They definitely had the ability to establish themselves. According to the book, Guangyuan sect's talisman forging methods were split into 5 paths: Hold Gate, Battle Gate, Life Gate, True Gate, and Refinement Gate. However, after an unforeseen event 1,000 years ago, many elders either fell or passed away. The whereabouts of the sect head were also unknown. This caused the most profound and unfathomable Refinement Gate and True Gate to be lost. Because of this, Guangyuan's sect was unable to recover from this setback. Ever since then, it had never recovered. And now, only the disciples of the sect head could use the Life Gate talisman. Thus, this book only recorded the methods of forging the door-holding talisman and the Battle Gate talisman. The door-holding talisman had a total of 4 methods: seal, lock, protect, and release. The Battle Gate talisman also had a total of 4 methods: sword, soldier, drive, and attach. There were all kinds of different types of talismans. If one were to look closely, there were more than 100 types of talismans in this book alone. It was unknown how many of them had never been recorded or had been lost. Every talisman had its own special method and talisman book to complement it. It would be wishful thinking to try and learn all of them. It seemed like he could only pick 1 or 2 of them to cultivate. However, after flipping through a few more pages, Zhang Yan found out that if the disciples of Guangyuan's sect did not inherit this technique, they would have to deal with scribbling talismans for the rest of their lives. Only after becoming a true disciple would one be able to inherit a method to refine the true life talisman. After that, there would be no need to draw incantations on the talisman paper. As long as the talisman was formed in the true life talisman and absorbed the 5 elements godly sand, they would be able to use the method to fight against the enemy. The stronger the power of the true life talisman, the more talismans it could activate. At this stage, talismans were no different. The book even briefly mentioned that there was a senior expert in Guangyuan's sect who once refined a true life talisman into a heavenly talisman and used it to ascend to the heavens. Reading up to this point, Zhang Yan shook his head and laughed. Every talisman needed the help of the 5 elements godly sand. The stronger the power, the higher the quality of the godly sand required. It might even consume a large amount of cloud sand. Even if you sold an entire sect, you might not be able to refine a heavenly talisman. Furthermore, this true life talisman could only be practiced by core formation cultivators. Even Xin Yufeng, who fought with Zhang Yan, could not do this. However, Guangyuan's sect had thousands of years of inheritance and had its own set of tricks. That was to borrow the power of the essence talisman and condense a talisman mark within it. During a fight, the talisman would be directly inserted into the talisman paper along with the godly sand. This was even more useful than drawing a talisman in advance. The only worry was that it would waste too much godly sand. Although this method was good, Guangyuan sect's disciples who were not direct descendants could not know about it. Even if they knew about it, they did not have any essence talismans for them to use. Zhang Yan thought to himself, so this is the real way to use the essence talisman. If that's the case, I only need to practice in the essence talisman and buy some talisman paper and godly sand to use this method. He flipped to the back of the book, preparing to study the method of refining the talisman in detail. Unexpectedly, when he looked at it, he felt that the talisman book was unusually familiar. After looking at it carefully a few times, he could not help but be surprised. This talisman book was actually evolved from the erosion inscription. However, when fighting against an enemy, it required a special technique and the godly sand talisman paper to activate its power. Reading up to this point, Zhang Yan could not help but be excited. Erosion inscription was his strong suit, so he could not help but read on with great interest. After reading it, he felt that the text of the book was concise and profound. On the other hand, Shen Yefeng's annotations were full of mistakes. Many of the improvements made him scoff. It was obvious that one talisman book could be used properly, but Shen Yefeng thought he was smart enough to split it into multiple talisman books. Not only did the power decrease, it was also much more complicated. He might as well just ignore Shen Yefeng's annotations and read directly. After reading to the end, he shook his head. As a disciple of Guangyuan sect, Shen Yefeng did not use such a profound technique and instead chose to cultivate a sword cultivation. It was simply a reckless waste of resources. In fact, as long as one mastered the sword and army techniques, the power of the talisman would not be any weaker than a flying sword. How could he know that not everyone could learn the method of using the talisman? The reason why he could read it so easily was because he was proficient in the erosion inscription. In order to learn talisman, one must first study the erosion inscription for a few years. However, after the Guangyuan sect went through a huge change, there were very few disciples, so where would they find the time to slowly learn it? He could only choose disciples who were talented in the Tao of erosion glyphs to inherit this art, while the other disciples turned to cultivate other cultivation arts that were faster and more powerful. Even so, Guangyuan sect's lower house was aggressive during the erosion inscription conference. If not for Zhang Yan's appearance, it was very likely that the Qinsang school's lower house would have been overturned. Shen Yefeng also prided himself on being talented and wanted to carry forward the Tao of talisman in his sect. However, after many years of practice, not only did he not make much progress, but he even delayed his own cultivation. He thought that he had reached the end of this path, so he had no choice but to give up. That was why he wrote down his insights and prepared to give it to his junior sister, but it ended up in the hands of Zhang Yan, who even looked down on his annotations. After reading through it, Zhang Yan closed his eyes for a long time, as if he was digesting the contents. When he opened his eyes again, a calm and confident look appeared on his face. This talisman looked mysterious, but for those who were proficient in the erosion inscription, it was nothing more than a painstaking effort. If the first time was not enough, he would practice it twice. If the second time was not enough, he would practice it 4 times. If the 4th time was not enough, he would practice it 10 times. If the 4th time was not enough, he would practice it 100 times, or even 1,000 times. Although there were only a few days left to go to the 3 pools, he firmly believed that if he focused on practicing this method in the broken jade, he would at least be at the same level as Shen Yefeng after 6 or 7 days. Thinking of this, he smiled slightly, took out the broken jade from his sleeve, and immersed his mind into it. Chapter 102. 8 days later, Qingwang Peak. This place was located at the northern exit of the Great Lake of Longji. It was a steep peak on Yuanqing Island, and the Cangu Mountain was 400 or so miles north. At this time, the clouds above the mountain were stirring, and a star-hub flying palace was floating above. This flying palace was 300 and 500 feet in length and width, and on each of its four corners was a 3-story watchtower. It was made of black bricks and golden tiles, jade stairs and bronze pillars, and dense colorful energy swirled around it. Fan Changqing sat in the middle of the main seat of the flying palace, and there were 10 mystic light realm cultivators on each side of him. There were also more than 200 clear Qi realm disciples standing outside the palace. However, these mystic light realm cultivators seemed to be dissatisfied, and they discussed among themselves. Someone complained, "Who is this Zhang Yan? Why did he make us wait for so long? Senior Marshal Brother He and Senior Marshal Brother Nian left long ago. If we waited any longer, all the credit would have gone to them. I heard that he's a core disciple that only recently reached the mystic light realm and was favored by Senior Marshal Brother Qi." Core disciple. That bunch of people who just sit around and enjoy the fruits of others probably never fought with a beast cultivator before, right? Which one of us didn't fight with Senior Marshal Brother Fan and crawl out of a bloody battle? What right does this brat have to come here? On the first seat to Fan Changqing's right was a handsome cultivator wearing a pure yang crown. He wore a long robe made of feathers and a pair of wide shoes. There was a white feather flying hawk at his feet, and he gave off an air of arrogance. When he heard these words, a hint of mockery appeared at the corners of his mouth. "Senior Marshal Brother Ren." The cultivator next to him came up and whispered, "Is Senior Marshal Brother Fan crazy? Why did he bring such a person?" Senior Marshal Brother Ren raised his eyebrows and scolded, "Don't talk nonsense. Senior Marshal Brother Fan has his reasons. Just sit down and don't meddle." Although his words seemed strict, there was no scolding in his eyes, and he seemed to agree. The cultivator nodded his head and sat up straight. Regardless of what was happening below, Fan Changqing sat on the high platform in the hall and did not speak. He only closed his eyes and rested. When it was noon, he suddenly opened his eyes and a bright light flashed in them. A smile appeared on his face and he waved his sleeves. He stood up and said, "Junior Brother Zhang is here." A streak of blue light flew in from outside and entered the hall. The light faded, revealing the figure of Zhang Yan. He cupped his hands in greeting and calmly said, "Greetings, Senior Brother Fan." "Greetings, Senior Brothers." Fan Changqing greeted him with a smile and said, "Come, come, come. Junior Brother, come sit with me." Zhang Yan walked forward as he was told. As he walked, he instantly drew a wave of strange gazes. There was hostility, disdain, and even mockery. However, he didn't care at all, and his expression was calm as he walked all the way to where he stood. It was quite a coincidence that Zhang Yan was standing on Fan Changqing's left, and he was facing Senior Brother Ren from afar. The latter couldn't help but frown and reveal a trace of displeasure, but he didn't say anything and just grunted coldly. Zhang Yan smiled faintly and didn't pay any attention to him. Seeing that everyone was present, Fan Changqing sat back on the main seat. He took out a restriction talisman from his sleeve and activated it. This flying starry palace rumbled and broke through the clouds, flying towards the boundary of the 3 lakes in the north. In this siege of the 3 lakes, the master and his disciples were responsible for annihilating the Jade Blood Pool, while the aristocratic families in the sect were responsible for attacking the Surging Waves Lake. Both sides didn't disturb each other. After this flying starry palace had a restriction, even the Yuanying cultivators couldn't do anything to it. It could advance and retreat freely in the killing formation. It could be said to be a sharp weapon for attacking. This time, the sect sent a total of 3 flying palaces out together. Each hall had a core formation cultivator in charge, and they could communicate with each other from afar. If one side was attacked, the other side would quickly rush over. Flying starry palaces like this were all built by the sect's spiritual mechanism institution. As long as the materials and tools were complete and there was enough manpower, it would only take half a year to build 3 to 4 of them. After fighting the 3 lakes for more than 10 years, excluding the ones that were destroyed, there were as many as 37 in the institution. As for second-rate sects, just one of them was like a treasure. This was where the strength of the profound sect of Qinsang school came from. During the journey, Fan Changqing introduced everyone to Zhang Yan. Seeing that Fan Changqing was smiling and talking to Zhang Yan with a kind attitude, even if everyone was dissatisfied, they could only be polite to him on the surface, but in their hearts, they didn't think much of it. At this time, a Ming Qi disciple walked into the main hall and reported, "Senior brother Fan, we've arrived at the Five Dragon Stream. There are no other great demons in this boundary, only a water snake that has turned into a spirit, leading 300 to 400 clansmen to cultivate in the mountains." Fan Changqing raised his hand and threw down a jade token, saying coldly, "Exterminate them." The Clear Chi stage disciple picked up the jade card and left. When he was outside the hall, he waved his hand and more than 100 Clear Chi stage disciples set up a flying boat and rushed down. About half an hour later, the person came back with the jade card. It was just that this jade tablet was originally smooth and flawless, sparkling and translucent, but now there were traces of blood-red patterns swimming within it. This was a cultivation-absorbing token given by the sect. Every time a demonic cultivator was killed, they could absorb a trace of their blood essence into this token. In the future, they could measure their blood in the merit institution. Zhang Yan originally thought that there would be an intense battle, but who knew that although they met more than 10 groups of demonic cultivator tribes along the way, Fan Changqing only needed to throw down a jade token, and there would be Ming Qi cultivators going down to clean them up. He didn't need to do anything at all. Even the profound light realm cultivators in the hall all closed their eyes and meditated, not caring about the battles outside. Fan Changqing turned around with a smile and said, "Junior martial brother, do you think this is boring? Let me tell you, it's been like this for the first few days. The deeper you go into the jade blood pond, the denser the spirit energy is, and the stronger the cultivation of the demonic cultivators is. The demonic cultivators on the outside have only cultivated for 100 years, and even if they have powerful spells, they have only just reached the manifestation realm. If no demonic cultivators above the mystic light realm appear, then it's not worth us doing anything." Although there were a lot of demonic cultivators, their cultivation speed was never as fast as human cultivators. This was because after they gained intelligence, the first 100 years or even several hundred years would be spent on the manifestation realm. For example, Luo Xiao had cultivated for more than 200 years, but he was only at the second level of the mystic light realm, bright night like day, and that was with King Bei's help. Most of the talented disciples in Qinsang school had cultivated to this level within 60 years. The difference between the two was huge. The demonic cultivators at the outermost part of the jade blood pond were called the wild races. Because there was a Yao King guarding the jade blood pond and there was a lot of spirit energy here, a large number of demonic cultivators would come and live here every year. Qinsang school would also send disciples out to clear the area every year. One reason was to train, and the other was to get rid of the demonic cultivators so that the spirit energy wouldn't be polluted. Fan Changqing had been doing this for a long time, and the mystic light realm disciples he led all had experience fighting the demonic cultivators in the 3 lakes. The flying palace moved quickly, and they swept through 12 mountains and lakes in just one day. Zhang Yan calculated in his heart. Apart from those that had run away, there were at least 3,000 demonic cultivators that had died at the hands of these Clear Chi realm disciples. If the other 2 flying palaces were added in, the number would probably reach 10,000. However, these demonic cultivators included the Meng Yao that hadn't transformed yet, and they weren't strong enough. No matter how many they killed, they wouldn't be able to damage the jade blood pond. When the Clear Chi realm disciples fought, they used flying swords to attack and magic flags to protect themselves. However, after a few battles, many of their weapons had been destroyed. At sunrise, the flying palace floated motionlessly in the air above a lake. Fan Changqing ordered someone to get a room, and then took out another batch of flying magic flags to distribute. Then, he ordered the disciples on duty to stay behind, while the rest of the disciples went back to rest. This star pivot flying palace had buildings, pavilions, and ponds. It wouldn't be too crowded even if hundreds of people stayed. Being a mystic light realm cultivator, and with Fan Changqing's special care, Zhang Yan was given a courtyard with 5 entrances to the front and back. Sitting in the 3-story building, one could see a green pond. The willow branches on the shore swayed, and the pink lotus flowers were fragrant. The white lotus roots were delightful, and there were birds pecking at them. It made people not feel like they were in the clouds. However, no matter how beautiful it wasn't as important as increasing his own cultivation. Zhang Yan only took a few glances before taking back his gaze and going to meditate. On the second day, everyone gathered in the hall once again. However, up until now, Qinsang's school hadn't truly crossed the boundary of the Jade Blood Pond, so it was still within the range of the other side. Therefore, they wouldn't meet any strong enemies, so they repeated what they did the day before. The next 4 days passed like this. At this time, they had almost killed all the beasts outside the Jade Blood Pond, but the more time passed, the fewer beasts they could see. It was obvious that they felt that Qinsang's school was serious this time, so they either hid or ran away. After killing for a few days and nights, Fan Changqing took out 12 jade tablets. Each jade tablet was blood red, and he gave them out. Almost every mystic light realm cultivator got one. Even Zhang Yan was given a piece of it. Each tablet had 500 drops of essence blood, which meant that they had killed 500 beasts. If they took it back to the merit court, it would be a small merit. Zhang Yan didn't even make a move, he just followed Fan Changqing around and easily got a merit. Thinking about those clear Qi realm disciples who worked hard for a few days and didn't get any merit, he sighed in his heart. This was the difference between cultivation and identity. If he wasn't a core disciple, if he wasn't a mystic light realm cultivator, he would probably be the same as those clear Qi realm disciples, only working hard for others. Even if he died, no one would say anything. Seeing that Zhang Yan didn't speak for a long time, Fan Changqing thought that Zhang Yan was too young and didn't like this kind of behavior, so he patiently explained, "Does junior brother think that I'm being harsh on those disciples?" "Wrong, those disciples came to our sect for a grand Tao technique, pills, and artifacts. How can we just give them to them for free? This gave them a chance, and without us, they wouldn't be able to kill the beasts. They were willing to do this, and this is also a chance for them to train themselves." Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, "Senior Martial Brother Fan is right." He put the jade tablet in his hand into his sleeves. He wasn't so noble. Although the cultivation of these 500 beasts wasn't high, it would take him forever to kill them himself. Why wouldn't he do it if he could easily get his hands on them? Looking over, the mystic light realm cultivators on the side also had expressions of certainty and thought that this was reasonable. Since they came here, they obviously had to follow the rules. As long as they didn't harm themselves, why would they stand out? Fan Changqing paused for a moment, but seeing that Zhang Yan was smart, he let out a breath and smiled. "Junior Martial Brother Zhang, rest well. Tomorrow, we'll need mystic light realm cultivators to enter the Jade Blood Pond." Chapter 103. Send a message to the sect. He Shiyun will attack Centipede Gorge, Nian Shiyun will attack Hui Yan Pu, and we will attack Nanda. Changqing casually tossed aside the Howling Lake golden sword, and straightened his body, his round and plump face was solemn. Chinese network. His voice reverberated in the main hall. When the people below heard it, their expressions tightened. Everyone knew that Qinsang's school had been fighting with the Three Lakes demons for more than 10 years, but until now, they had never attacked Jade Blood Pool from the front. Every time they attacked from the east and west, so they were very familiar with these two paths. Centipede Depression was in the west, at the edge of Jade Blood Pool. It was a gentle slope with no peaks or ridges, making it easy to enter and exit. Cliff Pool was in the east. Decades ago, it was a shallow pool. Although it was now covered by the lake, the depth of the water within 100 miles was less than 10 feet. But South Pond was different. It was a vast body of water with countless lake islands. Fog and chaotic formations were everywhere. It could be said to be a natural gateway to the outer lake of Jade Blood Pool. Almost no one in Chinsang school had ever been there. However, Fan Changqing understood that his purpose of this trip was to break through the path to the center of Jade Blood Pool and sweep away the obstacles for the sect. Naturally, he could not avoid the battle. He could only go forward. On the other hand, wasn't this giving him more opportunities to gain merit? Moreover, Hua was already prepared for this. He looked at a cultivator below and said with a smile, "Junior apprentice brother Qin, take out the thing." A tall and thin cultivator walked out and stood in front of the hall. He took out a scroll and slowly opened it in front of everyone, revealing a mountain and river topographic map. Fan Changqing pointed from his sleeve and said, "Junior apprentice brothers, please take a look. This is the geographical map of Jade Blood Pool that I managed to find. On it, the islands of South Pond and the distribution of the various underwater residences are roughly drawn. Although it is not very detailed, it is enough for us to use." Everyone took a look, and sure enough, the various lakes and islands were outlined on the map. Not only that, but there were also annotations at the side. For a moment, they all felt relieved. With this map, they wouldn't have to randomly run around aimlessly. Fan Changqing saw that no one was unwilling and nodded in satisfaction. He turned around and asked, "Junior Marshal Brother Qin, which island is the closest to us?" Junior Marshal Brother Qin looked at the map in his hand and gestured with his finger. He then raised his head and said, "Senior Marshal Brother Fan, the Guiyuan Island of the 18 southern swamp islands is the closest to us. The island master's name is Quan Gongwang, and he is a squid shrimp. He has cultivated for at least 300 years and is at the 3rd level of the mystic light realm. Luo Mengzi once made him a Yao general." Fan Changqing clapped and said with a smile, "All right, let's go there." He activated the talisman in his hand, and the huge figure of the flying spiritual pivot turned in the air and quickly flew to the destination of this trip. An hour later, a fog gradually spread out before them. Occasionally, thick clouds would drift past. It was unknown what was mixed within the fog, but even the vision of the cultivators in the hall was greatly affected. They were unable to see clearly. Suddenly, the golden bells above the main hall rang loudly. Fan Changqing knew that they were near a place with dense demonic qi. He waved the talisman and stopped flying. He looked at Junior Brother Qin with a questioning look in his eyes. Junior Brother Qin calculated with his fingers, then cupped his hands and said, "Senior Brother Fan, we should have entered the territory of origin returning island." At this time, the disciple in charge of scouting came up to the hall and reporting to Senior Brother Fan, "There is a demonic general with mystic light realm cultivation blocking the way. He claims to be the guardian of this place and is cursing. He wants us to retreat immediately, or else he will kill his way into the hall." Fan Changqing shook his hand and threw out a black screen after hearing this. When this item was unfurled in front of the hall, the original ink painting on it seemed to have come to life and spread out in all directions. Not long after, a vast world appeared on it, and the light of the water lake reflected the scene below. However, the imperfection was that the fog and clouds were still lingering. There were more than 100 flags erected below the flying spiritual pivot, and a demonic general with green skin and bulging eyes stood on a black cloud about 5 acres wide. He was holding a half-moon steel trident, and he was cursing non-stop. However, his words were unclear, and no one knew what he was saying. Fan Changqing couldn't help but laugh when he saw this. He pointed down and said, "Junior brothers, who will go and slay this demonic general?" Zhang Yan looked into the hall and saw that everyone was eager to try. It was obvious that they all wanted to fight, but there were 18 demonic islands here, so he wasn't afraid that he wouldn't have a chance to fight. Thus, he just smiled and sat still. Fan Changqing looked around, and his gaze landed on the cultivator in feather robes on the right. He said in a deep voice, "Junior Brother Ren, this is the first battle. You should go personally." Junior Brother Ren stood up with a smile on his face. He bowed slightly to Fan Changqing, then glanced at Zhang Yan, curled the corner of his mouth, and slowly walked out of the grand hall. The white-feathered hawk beneath him let out a long cry, spread its wings, and flew under his feet, allowing him to step on its back. Everyone in the hall didn't say anything after seeing that he was the one to fight. It was obvious that they knew they couldn't win against him. Zhang Yan had heard from Fan Changqing that this person's name was Ren Mingyao, and he was at the 3rd level of the mystic light realm. He was also Meng Zhen's disciple, and it seemed that Meng Zhen valued him a lot. Ren Mingyao walked down the hall and approached the demonic general. He was relaxed and had a hint of arrogance on his face. His sleeves fluttered in the wind, and he stood on a flying beast. From afar, he did look like a deity. When he arrived in front of the demonic general and heard the demonic general's unclear words, he couldn't help but say coldly, "You're wearing scales and armor, and you want to learn the human language?" The demonic general seemed to be enraged when he heard this. He roared and stabbed with his half-moon trident. Ren Mingyao curled his lips and took a step back. He took out a black compass from his sleeve and threw it forward. With a point of his finger, the compass immediately began to spin. Rays of golden sword chi flew out from it. They swayed in the air and turned into sharp flying swords that slashed at the demon general. As soon as Fan Changqing saw this, he turned to Zhang Yan and said, "Junior Martial Brother, look, this is Junior Martial Brother Ren's myriad killing sword plate. This magic treasure has been refined with no less than 15 divine weapons, as well as more than 1,000 flying swords with names. The metal chi has been absorbed into it, and once it is released to attack the enemy, it will be like 1,000 swords attacking at the same time, sharp and unstoppable." Zhang Yan looked at it and said with a smile, "This treasure is named 10,000 kill sword disc, but there are only 1,000 swords. I think there must be something special about this treasure." Fan Changqing narrowed his eyes and patted the armrest, saying, "Junior Brother Ren is right. This treasure was left behind by a senior of the Yuanyang sect. Originally, this sword disc contained the golden sword chi of 10,000 weapons, but most of it was lost when the senior passed away. Junior Brother Ren said that he wanted to restore the power of this treasure, so my master gave it to him." The demon general below looked like a valiant person. Seeing the 1,000 flying swords slashing towards him, he did not dodge. Relying on the divine weapon in his hand, he actually rushed head-on. He did not know that the flying swords looked like real objects, but were actually formed from sword chi. In just one move, he was cut into pieces, and his arms were torn to pieces. At this moment, he felt that something was wrong. He was about to turn and escape when Ren Mingyao laughed and pointed with his fingers. The 1,000 sword chi behind him surged forward, and in the blink of an eye, he was turned into nothingness. Ren Mingyao raised his hand and threw out a technique-absorbing jade tablet, absorbing the demon's blood essence. He then rolled up his sleeves and put the half-moon trident into his sleeves as well. Then, he activated the sword disc, and the 1,000 sword chi rushed back and forth on the black cloud, dispersing it. Strands of blood chi floated in the air, about 1,000 of them, and all flew into the technique-absorbing jade tablet. When there was no more blood chi, Ren Mingyao smiled proudly and raised his hand to keep the tablet. He then returned to the Ling Shu Flying Palace. Returning to the palace, he bowed to Fan Changqing and said, "Senior Brother Fan, I didn't fail you." Everyone in the palace saw him kill a demon general and kill thousands of demon soldiers with a wave of his hand. Their eyes were filled with fire, and they couldn't wait to be the next one. Fan Changqing raised his hand and signaled for Ren Mingyao to dispense with the formalities. He smiled and said, "Junior Brother Ren really did not disappoint us. Junior brothers, there is no need to be impatient. There are a total of 18 demon islands in the south, and we have only passed one of them. We are under the orders of the ancestor to attack the 3 lakes, so of course, we have to get rid of these thorns one by one. Junior brothers, you don't have to worry about not having any merits." After comforting them a bit more, he waved the tablet and flew to the next island. In the next day, they swept through 5 islands, and every time they attacked 1 or 2 mystic light realm cultivators would go down to deal with them. By dusk, only 3 cultivators, including Zhang Yan, had not gone out to fight. Although the group fought in a few places, they didn't provoke any powerful demons, so Zhang Yan wasn't surprised. He had once heard from Luo Xiao that the Jade Blood Pool was actually formed by the gathering of hundreds of demons, and the demons often fought and killed each other. The reason why Luo Mengzi was nominally the demon lord was because his tribe was the strongest here. The so-called demon generals and guards were just empty titles. It was common for them to kill others, ask for a talisman from Luo Mengzi, and then take over the cave. Fan Chongqing was thinking about whether or not to stop fighting today when a loud noise came from the palace. He frowned and raised his hand, stopping the flying palace. Soon, a disciple guarding the Wang clan came up and reporting to senior brother Fan, a demon general jumped out of the lake in front of us and said that he wanted to wait with us. Demon general? Only one. Everyone looked at the screen, and sure enough, there was only a single demon general standing in midair. He was 3 meters tall, with protruding golden eyes, and striped hair. His chest and abdomen were broad, and he held a large sword in his hands. His body looked majestic and mighty, but there was a sense of laziness in his expression. The remaining 2 Mystic Light Realm cultivators who hadn't fought yet had joyful expressions. Killing 1 demon general was equivalent to 1 merit, and he came alone. Wasn't this merit coming to their doorstep? A tall cultivator immediately stood up and asked, "Senior brother Fan, it's time for junior brother to fight, right?" Fan Chongqing glanced at him and felt that it was strange for this demon general to suddenly appear here. He thought for a moment before saying, "Junior brother Cheng, this demon is strange. Why don't you go with junior brother Qi?" Junior brother Cheng frowned and said unhappily, "If I go with him, won't I scare that demon general away? I can go alone." He thought in his heart, senior brother Fan is so unreasonable. If junior brother Qi goes with me, who will get the merit? Fan Chongqing squinted his eyes again and said, "If that's the case, then go." Junior brother Cheng was overjoyed and left with the order. All the disciples looked at the screen, but the mist was thick, so they could only faintly see junior brother Cheng arrive in front of the demon general. The 2 figures merged and separated, and a person landed. Everyone looked at each other. The fight between the 2 was very short, and there was mist blocking their eyes, so no one could see who it was. Not long after, a disciple came to the hall to report, "Senior brother Fan, senior brother Cheng was killed by the demon general in 1 move." Fan Chongqing's expression didn't change, and he said, "Who wants to go?" This time, the cultivator with the surname Qi came up and said, "Junior brother, I'm willing to go." He didn't wait for Fan Chongqing to agree and flew out of the hall, heading straight for the demon general. Fan Chongqing shook his head slightly and simply closed his eyes. After a while, there was a commotion outside. Another disciple came up to the hall and said, reporting to Senior Marshal Brother Gong originally had the upper hand when he went down, but for some reason, his mystic light couldn't even touch the demon general. Instead, he was killed by the coin. Fan Chongqing's eyes opened and he frowned slightly. As a core formation cultivator, he had to control the restrictions of the Flying Palace and defend against sneak attacks from other demons. He obviously couldn't show himself, so he looked at Ren Mingyao. Chapter 104. When Fan Chongqing heard this, his eyebrows furrowed even tighter. He slowly shook his head and said, "That's not appropriate. This demon general is hiding a killing move. No matter who it is, I'm afraid that one person will not be able to withstand it. In my opinion, we should work together and kill him." He deliberately avoided the topic of Zhang Yan and said that one person could not fight the enemy. However, Ren Mingyao's eyes flashed and he pretended to be cautious. He said, "Otherwise, this place is vast and the islands are scattered all over the place. This demon general's cultivation level is not below ours. If we work together, he will definitely escape. How can we catch up to him?" Senior brother Fan, are you saying that junior brother Cheng and junior brother Qiu Yan died in vain? He purposely raised his voice when he said the last 2 sentences. Everyone nodded and said, senior brother Ren is right. Ren Mingyao boasted that he was talented and was one of the best disciples under Meng Zhen. However, everyone knew that only those who were valued by Qi Yuntian would have a place in the sect in the future. Qi Yuntian was the third-generation senior brother. In the future, he would most likely take over the position of sect leader. By then, he would need a group of people to support him. However, all these years, he had not recruited anyone. Ren Mingyao was not in a hurry. Both of them were from the same master and he was the youngest disciple under Meng Zhen. He felt that he had the highest chance of being valued. However, Zhang Yan's appearance caused him to be on guard. As soon as Qi Yuntian came out of his closed-door training, he immediately took Zhang Yan out of the Devil's Shui. This action was thought-provoking. What made him feel threatened was that although Zhang Yan had only been cultivating for a short period of time, he had made rapid progress. At the same time, Zhang Yan was a true disciple and what he practiced was Jinren Sun's Lan Yun's secret book. When he put all these points together and calculated carefully, he suddenly realized that his advantage was almost non-existent in front of Zhang Yan. There was a high possibility that Zhang Yan would take away the position that Qi Yuntian originally arranged for him. This person cannot be left alive. This was a great opportunity. If Zhang Yan was killed by this demon general, that would be the best. If not, he could use this opportunity to observe this person's strength and plan for the future. Fan Changqing hesitated for a moment. It was Qi Yuntian who said to him after they left the Spirit Page Island, "Junior brother Fan, junior brother Zhang is very important. If you don't protect him well, I will hold you responsible." Although his tone was flat, Fan Changqing shivered at that time. One must know that although they were all disciples of Meng Zhen, Qi Yuntian was the only one who had inherited the true teachings from Meng Zhen. The rest of the disciples were all inherited from Qi Yuntian. Although he usually did not put on the airs of a senior brother, Fan Changqing was still very respectful towards him. Among the top 10 disciples in the sect, only 4 of them were from the master and disciple sect, but they were able to maintain a stalemate with the 6 disciples from the aristocratic families. A large part of the reason was that Qi Yuntian's strength was the strongest among the disciples. How could Fan Changqing dare to not listen to what he said? He thought he understood Qi Yuntian's meaning. Zhang Yan came to him to gain credit. If he accidentally died, then he would be held responsible. He sighed, thinking that if he sided with Zhang Yan in front of everyone, then he would lose face in the future. However, he did not dare to disobey Qi Yuntian's words. No matter what, he had to protect Qi Yuntian. He gritted his teeth and was about to speak, but who knew that at this time, Zhang Yan stood up, smiled, and cupped his hands. "Senior brother Fan, why don't you let junior brother go down and test this demon general?" Fan Changqing opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Ren Mingyao immediately said, "Good. Junior brother Zhang volunteering for the mission is truly amazing." He turned his head and cupped his hands at Fan Changqing. "Senior brother, since senior brother Zhang has said so, you can't be too unreasonable, right?" Fan Changqing looked at Zhang Yan with a complicated expression, but did not speak. He sighed, sat there, and lifted his sleeves. Ren Mingyao's eyes flashed with a hint of success. He suddenly turned around and said loudly, "Junior brother Zhang will definitely succeed. We will wait here for junior brother's good news." Zhang Yan smiled slightly, but did not choose to fly out immediately. Instead, he walked down the hall with a composed expression, and then walked out of the hall's door step by step. On the jade platform outside the door, more than 200 Ming Qi disciples saw him come out, and involuntarily moved to make way for him. When he came to the edge of the jade platform, he stopped and stood there quietly, as if he was thinking about something. Someone in the hall immediately mocked, "Could it be that this Zhang Yan is afraid? If you don't have real skills, don't come to the 3 pools to kill the demon general. What true disciple, even if he dies, he will only be a joke. Junior brother Zhang, why are you dilly-dallying? Are you waiting for the demon general to escape by himself?" Zhang Yan did not care. He closed his eyes, as if he was sensing something. When all the voices slowly faded, it was as if he was the only one left in the world. His spiritual vigor became unprecedentedly clear and pure. In his consciousness, he could clearly feel that there was a thick cloud floating towards this place. Yes, this is the time. He opened his eyes and suddenly leaped. In a split second, a golden rainbow pierced through the sky from top to bottom. The demon general was originally lazy, but at that moment, his expression suddenly changed. With a loud roar, he raised the big axe in his hand to block, but a golden ray collided head-on with it. There was a loud bang, as if the sky was collapsing. The disciples who were watching the battle lost their footing and fell to the ground. In a split second, the fog dispersed, and the golden fire rolled up, causing the sky to be filled with talisman. Everyone in the hall was originally looking at the screen coldly, but suddenly, the fog spread, and the sun was covered. In a flash, there seemed to be a flash of light, followed by a thunderous explosion. Then, the disciples outside the hall shouted in unison, their voices shaking the heavens. Everyone could not help but look at each other in confusion. Just as they were puzzled, an object suddenly flew in from outside the hall and landed on the ground, rolling non-stop. Drops of blood extended from the front of the hall to the middle of the hall. Outside, Zhang Yan shouted, "The demon general's head is here. Can it be used as a tribute to the two senior brothers' souls in heaven?" Fan Chongqing suddenly stood up, his face was filled with surprise. However, Ren Mingyao's expression changed greatly. Then, he seemed to have thought of something, and his expression became so gloomy that it seemed like it could drip water. Everyone in the hall was dumbstruck and extremely shocked. Such an extraordinary demon general was actually killed by Zhang Yan in an instant. Could it be that the strength of elite disciples is really so formidable, and their skill is even higher than Zhang Yan's? For a moment, the hall was silent. The sound of footsteps was heard, and Zhang Yan walked into the hall with a natural expression. As his sleeves fluttered, there was an indescribable calmness and ease, as if he had just casually gone out for a walk. At this moment, a figure in front of him blocked his way. "Junior brother Zhang killed this demon in a short time, congratulations, but senior brother wants to ask about one thing." Ren Mingyao took a step forward, stared into his eyes, and said, "What method did senior brother Zhang use to kill this demon?" Zhang Yan looked at him with a faint smile. "Senior brother Ren, you want to know?" He gently raised his hand, and Ren Mingyao suddenly saw a golden light flying towards his face. Seeing that it was too late to avoid it, he hurriedly rolled on the ground, but the light spontaneously combusted in the air with a tang sound, and instantly turned into a pile of ashes. Ren Mingyao looked embarrassed as he stood up, raised his hand and pointed at Zhang Yan, and said in surprise, "You." Zhang Yan put his hands behind his back, and said with a smile, "Senior brother Ren, don't be nervous, this is just an ordinary sword talisman. Senior brother is an expert in using sword qi, why are you panicking?" He took a step forward, helped him up, and whispered in his ear, "If you used the same talisman to deal with that demon general, I'm afraid your head would have been separated from your body." Ren Mingyao was shocked, and he sucked in a breath of cold air. He wanted to explode, but he knew that this was not the time, so he suppressed the anger in his heart, and a smile appeared on his face. "So that's how it is. Senior brother's knowledge is shallow, and I've embarrassed myself in front of junior brother." Zhang Yan's eyes flashed. Interesting, this Ren Mingyao was humiliated by him, but he was able to endure it, and he had to pay more attention to him in the future. Although Ren Mingyao was embarrassed just now, his ability to adjust himself was extremely strong. When he returned to his seat and sat down, nothing could be seen on his face, as if the incident just now had never happened. But at this moment, his heart was gloomy. What happened just now? Zhang Yan clearly did not do anything, but he felt a murderous aura, as if he could really kill him in one move. He calmed himself down, and his heart was filled with doubt. Was it just his illusion? Then he thought again, sword talisman. That seems to be the talisman of Guangyuan's sect, and I heard that it is very powerful, but I wonder which sect he learned it from. This Zhang Yan's foundation is shallow after all, and after being Zhou Chengju's disciple, he couldn't learn any profound techniques, and could only learn from second-rate sections. It's good that he spent all his effort on this, and although he looks powerful now, he will definitely not be as good as me in the future. Zhang Yan sat down again. Just now, he used the golden fire mystic ray to directly destroy the demon general's body, and for this attack, he deliberately waited for the moment when the thick cloud blocked everyone's sight, and the talisman was just a cover. Anyway, Qinsang School did not prohibit people from learning techniques from other sections. However, what he said to Ren Mingyao was not all empty words. The power of the real sword talisman was indeed extraordinary, and it was not much weaker than his star's sword pill. But to refine such a talisman, even with his current wealth, he could not afford it, and if he did not have the refining door chant of the 5 talisman techniques, he could only use it once. Fan Chengqing saw that when Zhang Yan returned to the hall, his whole body relaxed, and only felt that he had broken free from some shackles. He laughed and said, "Junior brother Zhang came back safely, and also killed the demon general. It is really fortunate." Just as he finished speaking, a golden sword suddenly flew into the hall. Fan Chengqing was startled, and with a wave of his hand, he took it into his hand, took out the letter and read it, and couldn't help but be overjoyed. "Good, tomorrow the sect will send senior brother Ning and senior brother Fang to come by Ling Shu Flying Palace to receive us, so that we won't have to fight alone, and we have more confidence in dealing with the demons in Jade Blood Pool." Zhang Yan was slightly surprised, and said, "Senior brother Ning? Is it senior brother Ning Chongxian Ning?" Fan Chengqing laughed and said, "Yes, this letter says that senior brother Ning Chongxian, with the help of senior brother Qi, broke through the confinement in one fell swoop, and condensed a gold core, and also a second-grade core. Since then, our Qinsang School has another core transformation cultivator." Chapter 105. Zhang Yan had heard from Zhou Chengju that the transforming core stage was extremely difficult to cross. If the opening of the meridians was the foundation of the Tao, then the Jindan was the ladder to immortality. Therefore, the Jindan was also known as the Heaven Ladder. First, Ning Chongxian had been cultivating for less than 50 years and was already a transforming core cultivator. Moreover, his Jindan was of the second grade, 1 in a million. He was indeed worthy of being Sun Jinren's most valued disciple. At this moment, everyone present faintly felt that perhaps the ranking of the top 10 disciples would change in the backdoor competition in 2 years. Fan Chengqing happily put down the letter and looked at Zhang Yan. He slapped his forehead and said, "I almost forgot, junior marshal brother Zhang has not obtained the jade tablet yet. However, since you have killed the demon general, I will record this merit for you." Finished speaking, he flicked his sleeve and a white jade flew towards Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan raised his hand and caught the white jade. He felt a chill in his palm, as if he was holding a piece of ice. With a shake of his wrist, he threw the jade into his sleeve. When the jade talisman returned, he only needed to use his own blood to refine it. Like a magic weapon, he could use it as he wished. However, if the blood was forcibly removed by others, it would become completely useless. There was no need to worry about others taking credit for it. Although he did not have this jade talisman and was unable to obtain the demon general's blood essence, he was able to kill the demon general in front of everyone's eyes. With the head as a witness, he was able to record a stroke in the merit book. The Achievement and Virtue Courtyard also recognized this. Today, in the conquest of Sanbo, the disciples were courageously advancing because the Qinsang School only accepted disciples. Apart from the direct disciples, the rest of the disciples would only be taught the ordinary methods of cultivating qi. Only when one had made a contribution to the school, or was valued by a teacher, could one learn the Xian Gong. Therefore, there were usually hundreds of disciples under a cultivator, but only a few would be able to learn the Xian Gong. Even if it was the celestial sect of wonders, the exchange of clansmen and disciples was only to maintain the relationship between each other. The techniques passed down from generation to generation would not be easily spread out. Just like Wang Pan on the Scarlet Haze Island, Duda took him in as a disciple only for the sake of the family's interests. He didn't really teach Wang Pan the Great Tao, so even after he died, Duda still treated him indifferently. As for the famous 3 skills and 5 scriptures and 12 supernatural powers of the sect, there were rules in the sect. Apart from the sect leader, no one was allowed to teach them. Even if one had accumulated enough merit, they still needed the approval of a group of Jinren and elders before they could be taught. Fan Cheng stood in the main hall and said, "It is already late today. My fellow apprentices, please disperse. Even if you are going to attack Sanbo, you must not neglect your cultivation." Seeing that everything was fine, everyone dispersed. Ren Mingyao was the last to walk out of the main hall. He looked at the red sunset on the horizon, and suddenly, he laughed out loud. If there was someone else here, they would definitely find it strange. "Zhang Yan, oh Zhang Yan, I was almost fooled by you." The so-called sword talisman is a combination of the 5 essences of the essence of the 5 elements. It is very expensive and can only be used once. Even if you still have sword talismans on you, you won't have many. It's just a bluff. Let's see how many times you can be so arrogant. He laughed coldly at the same place a few more times before he walked away. After Zhang Yan returned to his courtyard, he first cultivated the jade talisman. Then, he calmed his mind and meditated. When he was in meditation, he suddenly heard a soft sound of a silver bell. He slowly opened his eyes. He could tell that the sound was summoning everyone to the main hall. After thinking for a while, he got up and walked out of the door. He leaped and turned into a ray of light and flew towards the main hall. At this time, all the disciples also heard the summons and rushed over. Before long, they were all in the main hall. After Zhang Yan entered the main hall, he looked up and saw that Fan Changqing was sitting on his right-hand side. His original position was occupied by a handsome cultivator in a white robe with eyebrows that reached his temples. "Senior Marshal Brother Ning." Zhang Yan was startled. Didn't Ning Chongxian say that he would only arrive tomorrow? How come he had already come tonight? But when he came in, he didn't see the spiritual pivot flying palace. Was there some mystery behind this? He calmly went to his seat and sat down, carefully sizing up the other party. After the elixir was dissolved, Ning Chongxian was slightly different from before. Sitting there, the original swift and fierce qi seemed to have been restrained, but in fact, it was like a hidden sword tip, ready to be released at any time. When everyone had arrived, Ning Chongshuan's gaze swept down without stopping. When it passed by Zhang Yan's face, it paused slightly and then nodded slightly. Then he turned to Fan Changqing and said, "I heard that Senior Marshal Brother Fan has a map of the Jade Blood Pool here." Fan Changqing waved his hand and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Qin, give me the map." Junior Marshal Brother Qin hurriedly got up and walked a few steps forward, unfolding the map in front of the two. Ning Chongxian glanced at it and memorized all the landforms. He asked, "How many places did Senior Marshal Brother Fan take yesterday?" Fan Changqing reached out and pointed a few points on the map. He said, "These 6 places were taken during the day." Ning Chongxian frowned. Senior Marshal Brother is too conservative. Without waiting for Fan Changqing to speak, he reached out and pointed at the northernmost island in the southern Dang Lake. He said, "This is Bamboo Island. We will take it tonight." Fan Changqing was stunned and hesitated. He said, "Bamboo Island is in the southern Dang Lake, backed by Perching Eagle Land Island. There are many big demons there. If we go deeper, we will reach the inner lake of the Jade Blood Pool. If we take it early, we may not be able to defend it. Why don't we take the entire southern Dang Lake and then slowly plan?" Ning Chongxian interrupted him. "It's okay. This time I brought the Jing Luo formation flag. It's enough to defend. Besides, I can handle the demons on Bamboo Island myself. It won't make things difficult for Senior Marshal Brother." Fan Changqing nodded slowly. He said, How can I cooperate? Ning Chongxian stood up and smiled faintly. He said, I alone am enough. Senior Marshal Brother, please wait for a moment. When he finished, everyone only saw a flash of light in front of them and then he was gone. Fan Changqing sat in the hall and smiled bitterly. Ning Chongxian was very strong and had Qi Yuntian's secret order. He didn't dare to disobey. He couldn't help but sigh secretly. He said, Second grade Dan. I'm afraid Junior Marshal Brother Ning will surpass me. After sitting in silence for about an hour, a beam of green light flew into the hall. Ning Chongxian appeared on the main seat and said, Fan Shixiang, I have killed all the evildoers on Bamboo Festival Island. We can move to this island now. Fan Changqing nodded. It's all up to you. He took out the talisman and activated it. The flying palace of the spiritual pivot flew straight to the north. In less than a moment, it was above Bamboo Island. There were two gateway-like horizontal peaks on the island, which seemed to divide the island into 3 sections. Looking down from above, it looked like a section of bamboo. Ning Chongxian waved his sleeve and opened the restriction he set up earlier. The flying palace landed on one of the horizontal peaks. As soon as they arrived, everyone suddenly felt that the original fuzzy situation had changed. With 2 core transformation cultivators guarding this place, it was as if a sharp pillar was wedged in front of the jade blood pool, firmly nailing it here. In an instant, it separated the remaining 12 islands in the South Dang Pond from the demon horde in front of them. If the demon cultivators with Yuanying cultivation didn't come, the demons on the islands behind them would be at their mercy. The demon cultivators on the perching eagle island in front of them were forced by Ning Chongxian and Fan Changqing, so they didn't dare to move easily. Previously, Fan Changqing's behavior was steady, but it lacked a sharp and aggressive intention. But now, as soon as Ning Chongxian arrived, he directly pushed all the disciples to the front to face the many great demons. Everyone felt as if they were standing on a reef in the middle of a river, about to face the turbulent torrent. A string in their heart could not help but suddenly tighten. Suddenly, a kind of momentum of a life and death struggle was born. This was the grasp of momentum and the understanding of Tao. It was not that Fan Changqing was not as good as Ning Chongxian, but the two's Tao was different, so their actions were poles apart and had a different impact on everyone's state of mind. A cultivator sitting next to Ren Mingyao whispered, Senior Marshal Brother Ren, Senior Marshal Brother Ning's action is like pushing himself to the throat of the jade blood pool. Can the old demon bear it? Ren Mingyao sneered. Even if he can't bear it, he has to bear it. Why? Ren Mingyao said indifferently, Reverend Zhu and Reverend Yan have been sitting on the star-searching platform day in and day out to sense the qi activity. If I were to leave the Immortal's cave, I would definitely be detected by the 2 reverends. How could I dare to take such a risk? Besides, if he dies, we don't have to do anything. His thousands of years of foundation will be immediately divided by his subordinates. Hiding in the cave's restriction, he can still struggle at death's door for a few days. The cultivator couldn't help but nod. In fact, even without the faint deterrence of Jinren Zhu and Jinren Yan, as the demon lord, Luo Mengzi wouldn't easily appear until the last moment. This was like the head of Qinsang school. If he appeared to fight the enemy, it would give the outside world the impression that Qinsang school was in a life-and-death situation. Perhaps the entire Donghua continent would be shaken because of this. In the main hall, Ning Chongxian glanced down and said, Yesterday, Senior Apprentice Brother Fan led the other Junior Apprentice Brothers to sweep the 6 islands, but there are still 12 islands in the South Dang Swamp that haven't been cleared. Now that we have occupied Bamboo Island, it's time to turn around and sweep away the demon aura. Before dawn, we must take the entire South Dang Swamp. Fan Changqing frowned and said, Junior Apprentice Brother Ning, I'm afraid we don't have enough people right now. Originally, he had brought 10 mystic light stage cultivators. Including Zhang Yan, there were only 11 people. Now that 2 people had died in battle, there were only 9 people left. Ning Chongxian smiled faintly and said, What's so difficult about this? Where is Ren Mingyao? Ren Mingyao quickly stood up and said, I'm here. What orders do you have for me, senior apprentice brother? Ning Chongshuan's eyes shone with a sharp light as he said in a low voice, I'll give you 4 hours to sweep the 2 islands in the southwest corner. Do you have any difficulties? Ren Mingyao cupped his hands and said, since senior apprentice brother is giving me merits, I will gladly accept them. Ning Chongxian turned to look at Zhang Yan and said unquestionably, Zhang Yan, junior apprentice brother Zhang. You go and eliminate the 2 islands in the southeast corner. Zhang Yan smiled faintly and stood up, saying, I'll follow senior apprentice brother's orders. Ren Mingyao's eyes couldn't help but twitch slightly. Everyone's expression was also a little strange. Although Zhang Yan had killed that demon general during the day, in everyone's hearts, they still felt that he was not as good as Ren Mingyao. This kind of impression could not be changed in a short time. However, Ning Chongshuan's action clearly placed the two's strength on the same level. Ning Chongxian nodded slightly and said coldly, the remaining 8 islands will be handed over to the remaining junior apprentice brothers. If anyone slacks off and does not advance, don't blame me for diminishing his previous merits. When these words came out, everyone's heart trembled. Ning Chongxian flicked his sleeve and a total of 9 lights flew to everyone. These are the sleeve bags bestowed by the sect. There are 3 sets of array flags in each bag. After you destroy the islands, you will arrange them yourselves to prevent them from being taken over by demons again. Do you understand? Everyone hurriedly said yes. Ning Chongxian said no more and flicked his sleeve again. No one dared to hesitate. Streaks of flowing light flashed out of the hall and flew toward the various demon islands in the southern Dang Swamp. Chapter 106. This Nan Dang Swamp was also foggy at night. White smoke rose everywhere, making it difficult to distinguish north from south. The sky was pitch black and the moon could not be seen. There were strange fish swimming in the swamp, and the sound of splashing could be heard. The barren reefs and rocks outside were shaped like the dorsal fins of water beasts. If an ordinary cultivator were to fly across this lake at night, it would be extremely difficult for them to find an island. They could only rely on their memories to roughly determine the location of the island, and they might have to go around in circles, wasting a lot of time. However, the Yutsang sect disciples on this journey all had their own methods. The 7 disciples who had formed their own path were led by junior brother Qin, who had the map in his hand. This person was good at calculating the journey. He knew exactly where they were, how far they had traveled, and which direction they were in. There was no way he would make a mistake. Ren Mingyao, on the other hand, was different. His 1,000 kills sword plate had the ability to locate qi. Wherever the gold qi was strong and the weapons were gathered, it would definitely be where the demon clan was gathered. As long as he had the right direction, he would be able to find his way there. Furthermore, his white feather hawk was also a spiritual bird. It had the ability to identify the way, so it was very easy for him. Zhang Yan was different. He did not care about the direction. After leaving Ling Shu Flying Palace, he waved his hand and called out, "Where is Ao Tong?" As soon as the words came out, a half-foot-long snake-shaped living creature sprang out of the sleeve. With a shake of its body, it instantly turned into a 60-feet-long demon dragon with golden scales. However, its body was now equipped with a saddle, and in front of it was a cushioned foot. There was also a silver rope around its neck. Zhang Yan stepped on the cushion and pulled up the rope. He said, "We are going to the southeast island of Breath and Anma Island. Do you recognize them?" Ao Tong twisted his body and raised his head. He said, "Old master, I have been searching for food in these 3 pools since I was young. Although I do not know every place, I know how many hidden canals there are, how many strange peaks and rocks there are, and where the demonic woman likes to have fun. I, Ao Tong, remember them all." Zhang Yan frowned and tugged on the rope. He scolded, "Since you already know, then why aren't you leading the way?" Why are you wasting your breath? Being pulled by Xiao Chen, Ao Tong could not help but grin. He stretched out his body and extended his claws. Then, he flew into the air. His speed was not slow. As it flew, it muttered, "Master, that Xie Zhongyuan is really not a good person. You don't know, I was really bored to death in that beast saddle." Zhang Yan laughed and scolded, "Don't try to trick me. You're so dizzy in the saddle that you can't even see the sun. Do you think I don't know?" When Ao Tong was exposed, he could not help feeling embarrassed. In a moment of carelessness, he had forgotten about the Essence Blood contract. As long as Zhang Yan checked, he would know what Ao Tong was thinking. However, Ao Tong's talkative personality could not be changed. After calming down for a while, he could no longer hold it in and started talking non-stop. He was born as an ancient flood dragon and had received many inheritances from his clan since he was young. However, he could not distinguish them clearly and did not care whether they were true or false. He just blurted out everything in his head as if he wanted to pour out all the words that he had been holding in his stomach for the past few days. Fortunately, Zhang Yan was very shrewd. No matter what Ao Tong said, he did not get angry. He still had a faint smile on his face. If it were someone else, they would have already gone crazy and wanted to smack Ao Tong to death. Even so, in the end, Zhang Yan could not help but sigh, "I wonder if it was a good or bad thing for me to give you the body transformation pill and remove the bone in your throat." After traveling for an hour, Ao Tong shouted, "Master, look at the flashing light in front. That is Breath Island. This place is the easiest to recognize." Zhang Yan took a few glances and agreed, "Indeed. I wonder which disciple will cultivate here in the future. It will be very impressive." The scenery of the 18 Fiend Islands of southern Dang Marsh was unique. For example, this Breath Island. This island was not large, not more than 1,000 steps away. The island was surrounded by reefs that were half black and half green, glowing with a jade-green light. They were piled up in a ring, encircling the entire island. Further in, the rocks started to show a half-black and half-red color, looking like lava that had just spat out, encircling the island as well. As for the center of the island, it flickered with a golden light. Large rocks that looked like brass covered the ground. Furthermore, these rocks were used to prop up a cave. Even the fog could not conceal the light. To those who did not know, this cave looked like it was made of pure gold. One man and one flood dragon soon arrived. When Zhang Yan took a few glances, he felt it was strange. The caves that he took down during the day were all guarded by fiend soldiers. At the very least, there were at least 100 fiend soldiers. However, this island was completely empty. He did not know if this fiend had a strange temper or if there was something special about it. He asked sullenly, "What kind of fiend is cultivating on this island?" Ao Tong replied, "I do not know about this. There are fiend cultivators killing each other on this southern Dang Marsh's 18 fiend islands every month. I do not know how many masters have changed. The fiend cultivators that can occupy an island are definitely not weak." After saying that, he seemed to feel that he had diminished his own prestige, so he added, "However, they are naturally not as good as master." Zhang Yan ignored him. With a flip of his hand, he casually picked up 10 talisman and tossed them forward, saying, "Open." The 10 talisman flew forward like flying shuttles. When they reached the depths of the island, they exploded in the air at the same time. It was as if there was a sudden clap of thunder on the ground. Amidst the rumbling sound, the originally thick fog was immediately dispersed by half, revealing the true appearance within. However, the strange thing was that there was still no reaction from the cave despite the loud noise. Zhang Yan could not help but feel a little surprised. Previously, no matter which fiend island it was, the fiend generals on the island would rush out before they even got close. How could it be like this? When someone came knocking on their door, they still did not make a sound. Such a movement naturally alarmed the fiend lord of the island. However, This fiend lord had already found out that several fiend islands in the South Dang swamp had been destroyed. He felt that he could not afford to offend the Chinsang school, so he holed up and did not come out. After thinking about it, he knew that he would not be able to escape if he stayed here, so he dismissed his troops early. He originally had the intention to escape, but there was something in the cave that he could not give up at the moment. Therefore, he did not leave and wanted to take a few more glances. If Zhang Yan came here again tomorrow, perhaps there would only be an empty cave left. Now that he heard the sudden explosions outside, he knew that something was wrong. He did not know how many people the other party had, so he simply holed up in the cave and refused to come out. Seeing this, Zhang Yan could not help but laugh coldly. He took out the cloud-filling bowl from his sleeve and formed a hand seal. He flipped it in the air and the scarlet clouds instantly poured out like water bursting through a dam. They rolled around the island. The clouds looked as light as cotton, but once they came into contact with flesh and blood, they would become as heavy as mercury. Once someone was trapped in it, they would feel as if they had sunk into the bottom of the sea, unable to move at all. They could only be slaughtered by others. The fiend lord knew how powerful this was, and his face turned pale. He knew that he could not escape today. A black wind swept by, and this fiend lord flew into the sky. He faced Zhang Yan from afar and said with hatred, "I, Huang Peng, cultivated on this island and have never offended your Qinsang school. Why do you want to kill me? What is the reason?" Zhang Yan raised his head and looked at this fiend lord. He saw that this fiend lord was wearing a long robe and was dressed like a middle-aged scholar. He did not look evil like the other fiend lords, and his cultivation was only at the first level of the mystic light realm, similar to his own. Fan Chongqing had destroyed 6 fiend islands today. Although most of them were mystic light realm cultivators, for some reason, most of them were ignorant and couldn't even speak properly. Now that he had encountered someone who could speak clearly, Zhang Yan replied, "So it's fellow Taoist Huang. I heard that in the ancient times, heavenly demons ran amok and treated us humans like ants, swallowing them as they pleased. At that time, did they ever talk about right or wrong? If it wasn't for the powerful cultivators of the human race fighting with the heaven beasts for 1,000 years, shattering the land and shattering the pillars in the sky, giving us a chance to survive, the human race would probably still be food in the mouths of the fiend race. You ask me what is the reason? I'll tell you that this is the reason." After saying that, he didn't say anything else and pointed out with his finger. The star sword orb turned into a ray of blue light and slashed down. Huang Peng's complexion couldn't help but change when he saw how sharp that light was. He twisted his body and revealed his true form. It was a black eel that was 10 meters long. A clear profound light flashed and enveloped his entire body. Then, it shrunk downwards and he actually dodged it. Zhang Yan controlled the sword orb to chase after him, turning left and right. However, the light on Huang Peng's body seemed to be a bit strange. Not only was it very fast, it could also pass through the cracks in the rocks. It was extremely slippery. There were a few times when it looked like it was going to hit him, but it was dodged by a hair's breadth. Zhang Yan could only trap it in a certain area. Zhang Yan sneered and pointed forward with his other hand. A ray of blue and green light also flew out. The 2 rays of light, one blue and one green, flew in front and behind. After circling a few times, the range of movement that Huang Peng could move became smaller and smaller, completely blocking the way. Seeing that there was no way to escape, Huang Peng made a strange cry in his throat. He curled his body into a ball, and the mysterious light on his body shone brightly. Then, he spun like a top, allowing the Rui spirit shuttle and the star sword orb to hit his body. However, when these 2 ferocious objects encountered the mysterious light that was as clear as fresh water, they slid to the sides as if they were slashing on a ball of grease. Seeing this, Zhang Yan couldn't help but let out a "huh." Taking advantage of this gap, Huang Peng stretched his body, let out a shrill scream, and rushed forward, turning into a ray of clear light and flashing away. He originally thought that he could escape this time, and was using all his strength to fly forward. Who knew that when he had only gone a few dozen feet away, there was suddenly a golden light coming down from the top of his head. He didn't even have time to make a sound before he was wrapped in it. The two mysterious lights that were like fire and gold twisted up and down, grinding away most of the flesh and blood on his body. At this moment, with a clang sound, something fell out of it. The golden and red lights faded, and the figure of Zhang Yan appeared. He raised his hand, and the jade talisman flew out, collecting a trace of essence blood. He took 2 steps forward, bent down, and picked up the thing. He thought in his heart, I don't know what it is, even my golden fire mystic light can't grind it. When he pinched it with his hand, it felt smooth and soft. He didn't know what it was made of. It looked like gold but not gold, like silk but not silk. It was light in his hand as if it had no weight. When he looked carefully, he found that there was a line of writing on it. Chapter 107. The situation changes once again. Zhang Yan took a few glances and discovered that this line of words was written in etchings. There were at least 300 to 500 words densely packed together. Apart from that, there were also quite a few notes on the side that could be read. It was just that the entire technique was arranged vertically and horizontally, making it look very messy. Only after carefully looking at it a few times did he find its origins. This technique was called the true calming carefree technique, and it was a technique that focused on hiding and escaping. The protective clear light that the eel demon Huang Peng had used earlier was also recorded in this technique. This technique could even block the divine Rui shuttle and the stellar sword orb. Zhang Yan couldn't help but read on out of curiosity. After a cursory glance, he couldn't help but sigh. This Huang Peng's foundation was still shallow after all. He had only read the words in the notes, so he didn't understand half of it and couldn't understand the true profoundness within. If he had really cultivated this technique, he might not have been able to do anything to him today. However, when he continued to read on, he frowned. This was because this technique was not complete. It was obvious that there were still some areas that were lacking, and it wasn't just here. The most crucial areas were also the same. In this way, the originally brilliant technique had suddenly dropped by quite a few levels, which inevitably made people feel regretful. After roughly reading through it, Zhang Yan once again pondered over the gold leaf-like item in his hand. Looking at its shape and color, in his memory, there seemed to be a book that had mentioned something similar. After thinking about it with rapt attention, a thought flashed through his mind, and he thought to himself, could this be the German iron plaque? The German script iron plaque wasn't a powerful magic treasure. Instead, it was refined by a cultivator called Shintu Gua in his free time over 1,000 years ago. This item didn't have much power, but it could make a copy of any text or picture in a book within a radius of half a foot. Whether it was true or not, he would know after trying it out. Zhang Yan casually took out a pen and paper, and wrote 2 words on it. Then, he used the item to shine it, and he saw 2 words appear on the surface that was as smooth as a mirror before long. He chuckled and put the item away along with the pen and paper. He raised his head and looked at the cave. This Huang Peng had this thing in her hand. He wondered if she had accidentally barged into some immortal abode. Maybe there was something left behind. Thinking of this, he walked inside. When he broke into the cave, he found that it was a stone room about 30 feet in size. The layout was rough and simple. Except for a jade bed and a few clay pots, there was nothing else. However, it was quite clean, and there was no smell or dirt. After taking a stroll, he found a hidden side door on the southeast wall. It was hard to notice if he did not look carefully. He smiled and pushed the door open. However, as soon as he entered, a look of surprise appeared on his face. There was a lush green vine growing at the center of this stone room. Its appearance was coiled and twisted, and it was vigorous like a crouching dragon with its back arched up, giving it an extraordinary aura. What was even more strange was that this green vine was covered with characters that were as fine as ants. Zhang Yan moved closer to take a closer look and couldn't help but reveal a look of joy. The source text of the Dingjin Xiaoyao scripture came from here. Of course, this was not deliberately engraved on the green vine by someone who had nothing better to do. The entire incantation was inserted into the seed of this green vine by an unknown person with great magical power. As the green vine gradually grew, after a certain number of years, dense characters appeared on the branches. This kind of scene was quite strange. It was also the first time he saw it, and he couldn't help but be amazed. No wonder the sentence patterns in the German iron plaque were disordered. It turned out that as the vine grew, the order gradually rose in a spiral, and this Huang Peng didn't know how to sort it out, so it appeared unusually messy. Since the main text was here, this time Zhang Yan paid attention to it. However, as the green vine reached the top, the contents stopped here. At the end, there was a glistening red, heavy, and plump fruit. It looked like the melon was about to ripen and fall. Zhang Yan pondered in his heart. This kind of method was like the method of Taihao school, one of the 10 great mysterious sects. He heard that Taihao school had a green emperor divine tree. When passing down the method, they would let the true disciples go up the divine tree to pluck the seed, and then use the method of the school to guide them to plant a tree. When the tree fruit ripened and fell to the ground, they could find the incantation from within. It was said that every disciple received a different method. Although the strength of the method was different, it was the most suitable for their own cultivation. The other 9 sects of the mysterious sects couldn't compare in this aspect. Originally, that eel demon Huang Peng was waiting here because this fruit was about to ripen. He wanted to take the last incantation and leave. He didn't expect that at this time, Zhang Yan would come to kill him, and in the end, he died. Zhang Yan thought to himself. This method was very profound, and he couldn't let others benefit from it. However, he still needed to go to another island and couldn't wait here for long. After thinking for a while, he walked out of the cave and took out a set of formation flags from his sleeve. Then, he took out a jade strip and looked at the method to set up the formation. After that, he got up and flew to the east, south, west, and north of the island. After that, he set up the formation flags and opened the restriction. This way, aside from those who knew the incantation to open the formation, no one would be able to enter this place. Furthermore, it was impossible for the disciples of Qinsang school to come here at this time. After he killed all the demonic cultivators on Mon Island, the fruit should be about to ripen. Seeing that everything was set up properly, Xiaoqin didn't delay any longer. He called Ao Tong out and stepped on Ao Tong's back. Then, he pulled on the rope and headed for another demonic island. Mon Island was not far from Rest Island. After flying for about an hour, Xiaoqin could see it in the distance. Just at this time, a beam of light flew up from the island. However, the color was not pure, and it was filled with a demonic aura. Seeing Zhang Yan coming over on a flood dragon, the owner of that beam of light seemed to be startled. After a pause, he actually turned around and fled. That demonic cultivator was not slow. If Zhang Yan chased after him now, he wouldn't need much time. However, he was worried about the green vine scarlet pike. Since the other party was willing to let him pass, he didn't have the mood to chase after him. When he arrived above Mon Island, he circled in 4 directions, threw down the formation flags, and left. After Zhang Yan left, that beam of demonic light shrunk back. The light withdrew, revealing a half-foot-tall old man with white hair and eyebrows. When he saw the restriction formation flags laid on the island he cultivated on, he couldn't help but feel bitter. He thought to himself, this person came from the direction of Rest Island. It looks like fellow Daoist Huang is done for. Now that Qinsang school is surrounding my Jade Blood Pool's demonic cultivator, I can't afford to offend them. Why don't I find another place to cultivate? It's better than wasting my hundreds of years of effort. After saying that, he covered his face with his sleeves, and a beam of profound light wrapped around him. Then, he headed southeast. When Zhang Yan returned to Flickering Breath Island once more, it took him another 2 hours to go back and forth. Originally, he had come out at the Z hour. Now, it was the middle of the Yin hour, and the sky was slightly brighter. Xiaochen descended from Ao Tong's back and took out a jade strip. Then, he chanted the incantation and opened the restriction. He walked into the cave, but when he raised his head, the scene before him startled him. The green vine had already withered and turned gray. It was miserable, no longer as majestic as it was before. Furthermore, there was a ripe fruit on the ground. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "You came at the right time. One loss, one gain. Indeed, everything is predestined." If he had gone to chase after the fleeing demonic cultivator, he would have returned later. At that time, the seed might have taken root and sprouted. If that happened, who knew how many years he would have to wait to obtain the incantation again. Xiaochen raised his hand, and the fruit flew into his hand. Then, he carefully separated the flesh, revealing the core. With a glance, he saw that there were many small, densely packed characters on the core. He knew that it was the most crucial part of the incantation. He could not help but rejoice. With a flick of his wrist, he put the fruit into his sleeve. Since he had obtained the incantation, there was no need for him to stay here any longer. He strode out of the cave, waved his hand, and put Ao Tong back. Then, he lifted the escape light and returned to Bamboo Island. It was not until early morning that Zhang Yan returned to Bamboo Island. However, at this moment, he felt that the atmosphere was very different from when he left. Looking down from the sky, he saw that there were actually 2 flying spiritual palaces on the island. He did not know which core formation cultivator from the sect had come. He looked at the cloud and identified Fan Changqing's flying palace. Then, he descended and walked in. When he entered the main hall, he saw that Ning Chongxian was not in the main seat. There was only a middle-aged cultivator with a black beard that reached his chest sitting there with his eyes closed. The rest of the people were also nowhere to be seen. It seemed that he was the first one to return. Sensing that Zhang Yan had come in, the middle-aged cultivator's eyes opened slightly. He asked in a deep voice, "Which one are you?" Zhang Yan did not know who he was, but looking at this person's imposing manner and surging magic power, he knew at a glance that he was a core formation cultivator. So, he replied, "Disciple Zhang Yan." You are the true disciple that martial nephew Qi came out of the devil's cave." Unexpectedly, after hearing his name, this middle-aged cultivator opened his eyes at once. His face darkened and he said, "Cultivation should be done step by step and build a solid foundation. How can you take these crooked paths? If it wasn't for the sect caring about you, how could you be where you are today? You must remember, in cultivation, you must avoid short-sightedness and impatience. Don't bite off more than you can chew. You can leave first. I have other arrangements for tomorrow." After saying that, he did not wait for Zhang Yan to speak and waved his hand to drive him out. After Zhang Yan walked out of the flying palace, he felt a little puzzled. He did not know who this person was and why he suddenly reprimanded him. At this moment, he saw a figure. When he looked up, he saw Fan Changqing standing not far away and waving at him. He immediately took a few steps forward and walked up to him. When he came close, Fan Changqing smiled at him and said, "Junior Martial Brother Zhang, were you also reprimanded by Martial Uncle Go? Don't worry, this is his temper. He did not come for you." Martial Uncle Go. Zhang Yan's mind turned and he remembered this person. This person was a disciple of an elder in the Duzhen Palace. He had cultivated for nearly 300 years and was of the same generation as the few spiritual masters. He was usually old-fashioned and strict. He always talked about rules and principles. His way of doing things was similar to Zhuangbu Fan. But he still asked, "If Martial Uncle Go is here, then where is Senior Marshal Brother Ning? Fan Changqing sighed slightly and said in a low voice, the sect arranged for Senior Marshal Brother Ning to go back. They said that he had another important task, so they sent Marshal Uncle Gu to replace him. I don't know what happened. Chapter 72, The situation changes again. Chapter 108. 96 Translator, Transin Editor. Transin. Although Fan Changqing said so, he was well aware of the real reason why Ning Chongxian was summoned. Chinese network in Qinsang School, it was not easy for disciples to make contributions, but the Battle of the Three Pools gave them a great opportunity. Therefore, many elders hoped that their disciples could go there and get some credit. Moreover, there was the support of the sect, so how could they not be arrogant? But with Ning Chongshuan's arrival, the whole of the south was under the control of Qinsang School overnight, and according to the situation, he could directly kill his way to the eagle-perching continent with the people he had at hand. With the strength of a Grade 2 core and a Xian weapon, it was very likely that he could defeat them. But the deeper they went, the stronger the strength of the demon cultivators, and the stronger the resistance. After passing the eagle-perching continent, it was the inner lake of the Jade Blood Pool. Originally, they could easily get a share of the credit, but they had to fight to the death. How could the elders be willing? Those ordinary disciples were fine, but they could not let the disciples that they had painstakingly cultivated go to die, right? Therefore, after receiving the secret report from a few disciples, the elders discussed and went to find a few Taoist masters to complain. In order to appease them, they decided to send someone to replace Ning Chongxian. However, Ning Chongxian had never been willing to submit to others. If they arranged for someone else, they might not be able to subdue him. Therefore, they first arranged for him to be a deacon in the merit courtyard and temporarily invited him back. Then, they sent Gushua, a cultivator at the second tier of core transformation, to oversee Bamboo Island. Fan Changqing and Zhang Yan chatted for a while. Before they parted, Fan Changqing thought in his heart, Senior Brother Ning has been summoned back, but tomorrow Senior Brother Fang Hong will come. This person is Spiritual Master Zhu's disciple. Although I am not afraid of others coming to make things difficult for me, but now I am not the one in charge. Junior Brother Zhang will inevitably suffer a loss. So he coughed and said, intentionally or unintentionally. The elders in the sect said that Gushua is calm and prudent, and can take on great responsibilities. Then he left without looking back. Although the content of this sentence was not much, it clearly explained the cause and effect. Zhang Yan secretly pondered for a moment and said, doesn't this mean that Senior Brother Ning is impatient and cannot be placed in an important position? Since he had called Senior Brother Ning back and sent Marshal Uncle Gushua over to take charge of the situation, with Fan Changqing keeping such a low profile, there was no need to think too much. He knew that there was no one to take care of him for the time being. Not only that, there might even be people coming to make things difficult for him. However, he didn't really care about this. Whether he had it or not, he still had to walk his own path. Why should he worry about it? He was only hurting his own spirit. He let out a carefree smile and flew back to his courtyard in a streak of light. Just as he entered the room, he suddenly sensed something. Turning around, he saw a golden Howling Lake sword flying in his direction. With a wave of his hand, he took the letter and flicked his sleeve, closing the door. Then, he took out the letter and read it. He was surprised to find that the letter actually wrote about the opening and closing method of the Jing Luo formation flag. With this method, he could freely enter and exit Bamboo Island without being trapped here. Although there was no signature on the letter, the handwriting was sharp like a sword, and the strokes were sharp like swords. With a slight break, he knew that it was Ning Chongxian's handwriting. Zhang Yan looked thoughtful. Ning Chongxian's previous actions actually did not make sense. He came in a hurry in the middle of the night, and it seemed that he only wanted to take down Bamboo Island. After that, instead of being invited back, it seemed more like he had left after accomplishing his mission. There seemed to be some hidden meaning behind it, and giving him this incantation seemed to mean that he understood something. However, Zhang Yan felt that the clues he knew were too little, and he couldn't make any more deductions. If he had the time to think about it, he might as well spend more time on the carefree technique of real form. At least if he learned this incantation, even if he encountered danger in the future, he would always be able to escape. Thus, he cleared his mind of all distracting thoughts, sat down, and closed his eyes to comprehend the incantation. When it was 7 in the morning, the sound of a bell rang from the Flying Spirit Pivot Palace at the top of the mountain. This was a gathering of all the disciples. Zhang Yan opened his eyes, put away the incantation, and flew towards the main hall. At this moment, Gushua was sitting on the main seat in the main hall. Aside from him, there was another core formation cultivator called Fang Hong. This person's appearance was normal, and his nose was slightly sunken. However, his bones were thick, his back was thick, and his aura was powerful. The pressure he gave off was even stronger than Martial Uncle Gu, who was sitting on the main seat. After Zhang Yan entered the hall, many unfamiliar disciples arrived. Adding on the people who went to attack the Demon Island in the Southern Lake last night, there were already 48 Mystic Light Realm disciples standing in the hall. When all the disciples had arrived, Gu Shu swept a few glances downwards, stroked his beard and said, "Zhu Zhu Shi Zhu, although the southern Dongzhe has been cleared, there is still the eagle-perching continent in front of us. From today onwards, we will attack this place. Although there are 4 core transformation demon cultivators on this island, I, Fang Shizhu and Fan Shizhu will be able to hold them off. The rest of the disciples will take advantage of the gap and attack fiercely. Remember the 4 words: attack slowly and slowly, do not underestimate the enemy and advance rashly. After a few days, after slowly wearing down their wings, we can take this place in one go." Everyone hurriedly agreed. Gu Shua seemed to have thought of something and looked towards Zhang Yan. He said in a deep voice, "Since junior brother Zhang is a disciple of the Dan Ding Institute's Zhou Academy, there is no need for you to go to this battle. I have a pill refining room in the hall with many ingredients. Go there and refine some pills for us." Fang Hong, who was sitting on the side, had been silent the entire time. At this moment, he suddenly said, "Why don't we let him follow me, he will be able to make some contributions." Gu Shua shook his head and said, "Junior brother Zhang, I heard that when you open your meridian, your pulse is only low grade, and you still need to go to the demon's room to increase your cultivation. Even if you reach the mystic light realm, it is only forcefully increased. It is not comparable to the mystic light realm of normal disciples, and fighting is not his forte. This time, we will take a certain amount of pills from the Dan Ding Institute, and it is not inexhaustible. With him refining pills for us, we won't have to worry about not being able to make ends meet." Zhang Yan's accomplishments in the past 2 days were actually quite impressive among the disciples, but Gu Shua purposely glossed over it. It was obvious that he had other plans. Fang Hong didn't understand Gu Shua's plans, but he could only smile and say, "Martial uncle is right." However, he said in his heart, "What a pity, if this Zhang Yan was under my command, I could casually send him to fight with any demon general. No matter how lucky he is, there would still be a time when he would fail. At that time, I could silently eliminate him and sell senior brother Zhuang a favor. I'll let him roam around for a few more days, he will definitely find his mistakes." Gu Shua then said to Zhang Yan, "Junior brother Zhang, if you do well, I will naturally write a mark on your book of merits. You won't feel wronged. Go." With a wave of his sleeve, Zhang Yan felt a surge of power surging up his body. He didn't resist, allowing this surge of power to pile him up. After leaving the flying hall, he circled a few times in the air and landed in a pill room. This pill room was 20 steps in front and behind. The shelves on both sides were filled with rare medicinal ingredients. On the south side, there was a praying mat, and in the middle, there was a 3-legged pill furnace that was half the height of a person. This furnace had auspicious beast cauldron handles, dragon and tiger patterns, and was overflowing with spiritual energy. With one look, one could tell that this was a rare spiritual tool for pill refining. Just by looking at the layout of this place, Zhang Yan could tell that this Gushua was definitely an expert in pill refining. In fact, before Gushua cultivated, he was a cauldron boy in a mortal Taoist temple. Later, he was accepted into the Qinsang school. Although he learned the best cultivation method, pill refining was still his hobby. In his spare time, he loved to refine some pills at home. In Qinsang school, Zhou Chengju's pill refining skills were the best, so he often went there to ask for advice. But Zhou Chengju never paid attention to him. However, this time, he met Zhang Yan, Zhou Chengju's direct disciple. Gushua had the purpose of observing the secrets of pill refining, so how could he bear to let Zhang Yan go to the battlefield to fight? As for the open and secret fights between the few spiritual masters, he didn't take it to heart. As Zhang Yan was observing in the hall, a spark suddenly flew out from outside and threw it into the pill furnace. With a boom, the charcoal under the pill furnace was ignited. Zhang Yan couldn't help but smile. It seemed that if he didn't refine some decent pills, this senior Uncle Gu would definitely not let him leave. That was fine. Since he could also make a contribution in the refining hall, and there were people who were willing to let him practice with these rare medicinal ingredients, why should he resist? Moreover, this pill furnace was a spirit tool, so he didn't need to look after the fire. In this way, he still had a lot of time to cultivate, so why not? It was just that this Gushua should also be knowledgeable. Using the ordinary pills recorded in the pill manual to deal with him might not be able to enter his eyes, so he needed to take an unconventional approach. Zhang Yan went over everything he knew a few times in his mind. After a while, a trace of a smile floated on his face, and he said, "Got it." He reached into his sleeve and took out the bottle of vitality refining pills that he obtained from the Blood Soul sect disciple. The method of making pills needed one main ingredient as a guide, and many other ingredients as a supplement. The main ingredient was the most important, and most of the effects of the pills would come from this ingredient. The main ingredient was usually a pill that the pill refiner had chosen beforehand and used a unique method to make. Therefore, even if others could learn the pill refinement method, they wouldn't be able to learn how to make the main ingredient. Although Zhang Yan didn't have the main ingredient, he could use the bottle of vitality refining pills in his hand as a substitute. One had to know that each vitality refining pill contained the essence of at least 100 beast cultivators. If a normal cultivator didn't know the method, they would explode from the energy of the pill. Even a disciple of the Blood Soul sect, if they were only at the mystic light realm, would probably only need a few months to refine this pill. If he used this pill as the main ingredient and made a pill according to Zhou Chengju's secret recipe, the effects would definitely be shocking. With a plan in mind, Zhang Yan went to pick out many medicinal ingredients and put them to the side. Because he couldn't overdo it after the fire was lit, he had to wait patiently. Only when it was suitable would he open the furnace and start to refine the pill. About half a day later, he saw that the furnace was getting hotter and hotter, and he threw in the medicinal ingredients that he had prepared. The effects of this pill were all on the Essence Cloud pill, so he didn't put much importance on the supplementary ingredients. As long as the effects didn't conflict, he didn't care. Although he wasted a lot of it, it wasn't his own. Therefore, he didn't feel bad for Gushua at all. This furnace was indeed worthy of being a treasure. The moment the medicinal ingredients were thrown in, the fire started to burn fiercely. 2 hours later, Zhang Yan opened the side lid of the furnace and took out the Essence Cloud pill. With a wave of his finger, he cut off 1/5 of the pill and threw it into the furnace. At the same time, he blew a long breath into the furnace. Under the pressure of his spiritual energy, the flame at the bottom of the alchemy furnace was first suppressed. As he turned his hand and closed the side lid, a loud muffled sound came from within the furnace. The entire alchemy furnace seemed to shake, and the flame fiercely shot up more than half a foot high. For a moment, the fire inside the furnace was scorching hot, and it was as red as blood, as if the entire alchemy furnace was going to melt. Zhang Yan sat on the praying mat and looked at it calmly. After a while, the fire slowly subsided, and a dense essence qi was produced in the furnace. For a moment, the essence qi was boiling, and the room was filled with a strange fragrance. Zhang Yan knew that this essence qi was the essence of the main ingredient and the supplementary ingredients. However, it wasn't complete yet, there was still one last crucial step. This step was called unifying the pill. It was the most important step in the entire alchemy method, and it was also a test of the alchemist's ability. Whether the medicinal efficacy of a furnace of pills could be evenly distributed into 10 pills or 100 pills, it all depended on this step. However, even if the medicinal efficacy was sufficient, it didn't mean that the smaller the number of pills, the greater the medicinal efficacy. This was because there was a limit to how much medicinal efficacy each pill could contain. If there was too little, it would be a waste of the ingredients, and the medicinal efficacy would be too strong. However, if there was too much, not only would the medicinal efficacy be thin, but the medicinal efficacy of the supplementary ingredients could also be overrun, resulting in the entire furnace being wasted. Zhang Yan didn't care so much. This pure vitality pill was enough to refine 10 furnaces of pills, and he had 2 bottles in his hands. Wasting a little was nothing. He used all his strength to urge the real fire, and with a flick of his sleeve, he opened the lock on the lid of the furnace. With a bang, the medicinal efficacy rushed out of the lid, and a mass of essence qi rushed out. If he didn't seize this opportunity, it wouldn't take more than a few breaths for this essence qi to completely dissipate. Zhang Yan calmly spat out a mouthful of air and wrapped it around the essence qi. Then, he stretched out his hand and made a grabbing motion. Several streams of medicinal liquid that were as dense as pure syrup sprayed out, turning into hundreds of drops that scattered into the essence qi. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, Zhang Yan withdrew the ball of qi, and dozens of pills fell down like rain. Taking the porcelain bottle that he had prepared in advance, he reached out and scooped up all the pills. It took him 3 or 4 porcelain bottles in a row to fill up. There was no need to count. Zhang Yan knew that he had condensed a total of 98 pills this time, but among them, there were 42 pills that were useless. However, this was after all the first time he had tried it after leaving Zhou Chengju. Being able to achieve a success rate of 50%, Zhang Yan was already quite satisfied. Taking a pill and sniffing it, he felt as if his brain had inhaled an abundant amount of yuan qi. He smiled confidently. With these bottles of pills, he wasn't afraid that Gushua wouldn't give him a credit. Chapter 109. On the eagle-perching continent, the battles continued for more than 10 days. Under the fierce attacks of the Qinsang school, the Yao on this island were forced to retreat and many groups were slaughtered. Chinese network. Although there were 4 core transformation realm demon cultivators in charge of the land test, they were all blocked by Gushua, Fan Changqing, and Fang Hong during the battle, so they could only sit and watch as their subordinates were slaughtered by the Dark Azure sect cultivators. However, the Qinsang school cultivators felt that the time wasn't right and didn't want to force the core transformation Yao cultivators too much. Therefore, every time they had the upper hand, they would leave and wait 2 or 3 days later when the Yao gathered again. After repeating this a few times, the disciples of the Qinsang school were all very satisfied. If they only went out to collect merit, how could they be so satisfied now? Now that they had senior brother Zhao Nan, who had a high cultivation, and the help of their fellow sect members, they didn't feel tired at all when facing those Yao cultivators who only had some shallow Dao skills. They only felt that their hands were getting soft from killing every day. Over the past few days, more and more disciples had gathered in the Yutsang sect. Several spiritual masters and disciples of the elders had also arrived. Although there were many Yao cultivators on the eagle-perching continent, they couldn't handle this and retreated into the depths of the continent. The disciples of the Qinsang school had to go deep into the continent to find these Yao cultivators, but they didn't care too much. It wouldn't be too late to take down the eagle-perching continent after all the disciples had collected enough merit. On this day, After killing the Yao cultivators again, the 3 flying palaces formed a triangle in the sky. In the middle, nearly 200 mystic light realm cultivators formed a 5-colored ray of light and returned to Bamboo Island. Right now, the 18 islands of the southern swamp were all covered with formation flags, and the restrictions were connected to each other to disperse the evil aura. The clouds above the southern swamp were slowly dispersing. At this moment, the sun was setting and the surface of the lake was glistening. The spirit beasts and birds were flying around, giving off the atmosphere of a celestial being. There were many beautiful female cultivators among the mystic light realm cultivators, and a few of them were even protected. They were all disciples of spiritual master Qin from the glittering jewel grotto heaven. This perfected Qin had a special status, so he did not care about the background of his disciples. In this battle of the 3 pools, there were disciples from the glittering jewel grotto heaven in the surging waves lake and the jade blood pool. Among the female crowns, the leader was a woman in her 20s. She had white teeth and skin, and her eyes were charming and affectionate. At this moment, she made a request with her jade-like hand, and a long rainbow appeared in the sky. She said happily, "Senior Marshal Brother Mo, the pill you gave me today is really good. When I use the man-e sword, I feel that it is much smoother than before." Standing next to her was a handsome man. He was called Mo Tianhua, and he was the disciple of Elder Qi. He couldn't help but smile when he heard this and said, "Junior Marshal Sister Yang Ying, this pill is called the biochemical pill, and it was created by a disciple of the Pill Cauldron Courtyard." Marshal Uncle Gu also praised it after seeing it and personally gave him credit. It's a pity that 1 cauldron of pills can only be made every 3 days, and 1 cauldron only produces 20 to 30 pills. Not everyone can get one. Yang Ying understood and said, "So it's a disciple of the Pill Cauldron Courtyard. No wonder. With the effect of this pill, it's not wrong to give him credit." Mo Tianhua snorted lightly and said in disdain, "This person is also at the mystic light realm, but his foundation is weak and can't compare to us. The mystic light he cultivates is not pure, so he won't be able to reach the Tao in the future." That day, Gu Shua said in front of everyone that Zhang Yan's Fa Li was weak. Although the cultivators who saw Zhang Yan kill the demon general did not think much of it, they thought that Gu Shua might have a deeper meaning, so no one made it public. However, the disciples who heard the rumors later all believed it to be true. It had to be known that if one didn't have a high-level cultivation method and didn't have the help of a heavenly treasure, even if they managed to increase their cultivation, their future achievements would be limited, and they wouldn't be able to compete with those of the same generation. Mo Tianhua only knew that there was a disciple in the Flying Palace who was very talented in the Tao of alchemy. However, this kind of alchemist was usually someone who had no hope in cultivation, so he naturally looked down on them. Thus, his words were full of contempt. Yang Ying blinked her beautiful eyes and said, "Senior Marshal Brother Mo, although the Tao of alchemy can't lead to immortality, we cultivators can't leave it either. This person's attainments in the Tao of alchemy are so profound. If he takes over the Tao of Zhou Institute in the future, the sect will definitely not mistreat him." Mo Tianhua wasn't stupid. Seeing that Yang Ying's words were always related to the Tao of alchemy, he somewhat understood in his heart. He smiled and said, "Junior Marshal Sister Yang, do you have any difficulties that you need my help with?" Yang Ying originally had this intention, so she generously admitted it. Senior Marshal Brother guessed correctly. Senior Marshal Brother, you also know that I'm a disciple of Teacher Qin. I don't know what grudges I have with Zhou Institute and Teacher Qin, but there was a strict order that I'm not allowed to ask for alchemy from the Danding Institute's disciples. However, my rainbow shadow crossing moon technique has reached a bottleneck, and I need a clear glass pill to cleanse my internal organs, nourish my yuan yin, and regulate my qi. Now that this senior martial brother is good at alchemy, I intend to ask him to help me refine this pill. However, I'm afraid that it'll be inappropriate if teacher finds out, so I'd like to trouble senior martial brother to help me. Mo Tianhua secretly thought that he was originally a disciple of Elder Chen. If he appeared, that Danding Institute disciple would have to give him some face. It was just a small matter. He immediately patted his chest and said, "This is not difficult. I'll go on behalf of Junior Marshal Sister Yang." I don't think a small pill master would dare to disobey. Seeing that he agreed so readily, Yang Ying couldn't help but be happy. She curtsied and said, "Senior Marshal Brother is really generous. Then Junior Marshal Sister will entrust this matter to Senior Marshal Brother." Mo Tianhua waved his hand and said, "We're all fellow disciples, no need to be so polite." Yang Ying said, "If I can get this pill and cleanse my rainbow shadow mysterious light, Junior Marshal Sister's cultivation will definitely not be below Junior Marshal Sister Feng Yao." I heard that at Surging Waves Lake, she was in the limelight. As she said this, her tone couldn't help but contain jealousy. When Mo Tianhua heard this, he knew that the disciples of their sect were secretly competing with each other. It wasn't convenient for him to say anything, so he just smiled and didn't say anything. Yang Ying sighed again and said, "I heard that the disciples of aristocratic families are coming out in large numbers. They are all amazing and outstanding people. In the battle at Surging Waves Lake this time, there were even many senior marshal brothers who we usually only hear of but never see in person. And among us, I'm afraid that other than Senior Marshal Brother Ren, there's no one else who can provoke this scene." Hearing this, Mo Tianhua was a little unconvinced and said, "In my line of disciples, there are two Senior Marshal Brothers, Huang Fuzhou and Yu Chongyang. Senior Marshal Brother Huang has obtained the ancient celestial method, and Senior Marshal Brother Yu is even more powerful. There's a divine object choosing its master. Now they're both preparing for the sect competition in 2 months and are in closed-door cultivation. That's why they haven't come here. Otherwise, they wouldn't lose to those disciples of aristocratic families." Yang Ying gave him a flirtatious look and said softly, "Actually, Senior Marshal Brother Mo isn't bad either." Her look made Mo Tianhua's heart burn. Who in the sect didn't know that if one could become Dao companions with the disciples of Jinren Qin, there would be countless benefits. Although it would not be bad if one could obtain the celestial concubines of the Jinren Qin, but the disciples of Jinren Qin were proper Taoists. The difference in status between the two was like heaven and earth. Naturally, they couldn't be compared. He laughed and said, "Junior Marshal Sister Yang must be joking. How can I compare to those two senior marshal brothers? But I, Mo Tianhua, have been taught the great Tao by my master. I think I also have some skills." At this moment, on Bamboo Island, Zhang Yan sat on the praying mat and closed his eyes to meditate. For the past 10 days, other than concocting pills, he had been practicing the real form of carefree scripture. Although this scripture didn't take a difficult path, there were many aspects that were unique and there was no way to find a way forward. Fortunately, he had the broken jade in his hand. He first understood the scripture in the scripture, and then he started to practice it. Walking through the broken jade was like going through a round of practice. Any difficult juncture was nothing in front of him, and he would pass it with a light pile. After practicing for 3 days, he shook his body and a shadow that looked exactly like him appeared on top of his head. This shadow was formed by a ray of light, and its aura was exactly the same as his own. In times of danger, he could give up this shadow to block the magical weapons and flying swords, and he could hide his body and escape. However, his cultivation wasn't deep yet, so this shadow was still a bit erratic. According to the real form of carefree scripture, he still needed to use his own blood essence to condense it for a few days, until this shadow became as solid as a real person. Even if it was attacked by a saber or an axe, it would still look like a living person. However, this scripture was only the most basic scripture in the real form of carefree scripture. The last part of the real form of carefree scripture actually required one to be above the core transformation realm in order to practice it. At that stage, there were many parts that he couldn't understand. Right at this moment, a muffled sound entered his ears. He looked up and saw a blazing flame inside the cauldron. He felt a slight tremble under his seat, and he knew that the cauldron was about to be completed. After refining this pill a few times, he was already familiar with it. He waved his sleeve and opened the lid. In a split second, essence energy surged and filled the air, and the room was filled with a strange fragrance. Zhang Yan patted the cauldron, and the medicinal liquid that flew out rolled in the essence energy, then each of them turned into a pill and fell down. He caught all the pills and put them into a bottle. He couldn't help but smile. Good, 108 pills. The number of pills I have now is enough to last me for half a month. Every time he refined a cauldron, Gushua had to record his merit. He told the outside world that he refined a cauldron every 3 days because he didn't want people to think that this thing was too cheap. Moreover, during these 3 days, he wasn't afraid of people coming to disturb him, so he could cultivate without worry. However, he didn't turn a deaf ear to the outside world these days. Ever since Ning Chongxian taught him the method to open and close the Jing Luo formation flag, he began to pay attention to the demons in the eagle-perching continent. With one look, he really felt that something was wrong. These demons seemed to be retreating every day and had already given up a large area of land, but under careful observation, he found that there seemed to be a pattern, as if they were deliberately luring the Qinsang school disciples to go deeper. Zhang Yan thought to himself, old demon Luomengza has been here for hundreds of years, how could it be easy? Since I can't go into battle, I naturally don't need to follow the flying palace every day. When I master the escape technique in the true form scripture, I can deceive Gushua. When they go to attack the eagle-perching continent, I can stay on Bamboo Knot Island and avoid a crisis. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.